A quiet night under a bright full moon. Deep in the woods, a young man sits exhausted against a tree, catching his breath in the dark. Suddenly, a group of menacing men approaches, and their bald leader demands to know how he got there. Dominic is completely baffled by this, asking the leader what on earth he means by that. The young man then looks down in silence, trying to process the strange situation. Kalan bluntly explains that he simply walked there, leaving the protagonist with nothing to say but a quiet acknowledgement. The creepy old man with the mustache licks his lips, preparing to make his next move. The bald head mockingly asks Dominic what he can even do, prompting a quiet, hesitant response from the young man. With a bright smile, Dominic proudly announces that his specialty is feeding everyone well. A cloud of dust rises in the distance, quickly approaching a small, peaceful village. A wild crowd of hungry villagers charges forward, complaining that lunch is way too late. The former lord jokes about almost eating the village head out of hunger, while the others tease Dominic for working overtime. He screams at the top of his lungs for everyone to line up properly. His demand for order sends a sudden wave of panic through the tough-looking crowd. When a scarred villager compliments the food, Dominic smugly takes full credit for his cooking. Dominic introduces himself as the village chef, playfully denying extra portions to the hungry crowd. He explains that they are an evergreen, a tiny fishing village hidden from the maps. Though founded by scary, retired mercenaries, Dominic considers them the first honest people he has met. An impatient voice demands food, reminding Dominic of the man who saved him from starvation. The village head dramatically complains about getting thin from hunger. A dark transition sets a somber tone for a memory of Dominic's past. Dominic recalls how Head Kalan took him in when he was a hopeless war refugee. A whole year has passed since he settled down in Evergreen, and he remains incredibly grateful to the kind locals who welcomed him. Now, one of the local fishermen takes a steaming spoonful of the freshly prepared soup. The village head is absolutely blown away by the taste, declaring the cream soup a masterpiece every single time. Dominic is thrilled to see them enjoy it, having prepared a perfectly balanced, high-energy meal for the hard-working crew. He carefully sautés the vegetables, simmers them with milk and roux, and seasons it with herbs since pepper is too pricey. Even though it is just a simple basic cream soup, Dominic knows exactly what he is doing. It is the perfect meal to warm up the freezing fishermen, who happily dig in while the head asks if this is yesterday's batch. Dominic happily confirms it, explaining he added extra fat to make it extra rich and delicious. The village head takes a big bite of the juicy sausage and is instantly blown away by the incredible flavor. He grins mischievously, explaining that some foods just need to be greasy, and boasts that his perfected sausage recipe is good enough to sell. Suddenly, he blinks in surprise as a loud shout catches his attention. An off-panel voice yells at the village head for skipping his vegetables yet again. Kalan, holding a single sausage on a fork, grumbles that the nagging is worse than his wife's, claiming a lion doesn't eat grass. Dominic snaps back, asking what kind of lion picks at his food like a child, while the old man just chuckles at his anger. Sighing, Dominic realizes that old habits really do die hard. He can't believe he's still acting like a nagging nutritionist from his past life. Back in South Korea, he was just an ordinary office worker in his 30s, managing meal plans for schools and companies. He recalls his past life as a nutritionist named Han Young-min, back when he wore a medical mask and lived in a completely different world. Even though those memories suddenly returned, they didn't change his grim reality as a war refugee, until Kalan approached him with a casual question about his weekend plans. The bald man acts completely casual, brushing it off as if he is about to ask for a tiny favor. But then he casually drops the bombshell that Dominic is going to be the new village head, starting next week. Dominic completely loses his mind, screaming that this is definitely a massive deal. He accuses the old man of sneaking that massive responsibility in like a snake, but Kalan just picks his nose and claims it only requires attending a monthly meeting at the Lord's castle. Just then, another villager walks up with a tray of food, teasing Dominic about his sudden promotion to village head. He explains that the Lord ordered all village heads to learn how to read because most are illiterate, and laughs at the thought of Kalan ever doing that. Head laughs that they know him too well, but Dominic points out that being illiterate is nothing to be proud of, and asks if he should really take over just because of that. When the old man proudly claims that a lion doesn't need to read, Dominic Griley tells him to just go live as a beast then. He sighs and asks if he just needs to go and fill a seat, which the old leader eagerly confirms, promising that the village funds will cover all his travel expenses. Standing together on the grassy hill, Dominic asks if the meetings start next month, but Head drops a bomb by telling him he actually has to leave the day after tomorrow. Dominic is left completely speechless by the sudden rush as Head cheerfully bids him goodbye. 2 days later, the scene shifts to the grand and imposing castle of the local lord. Inside the castle, a formal meeting is called to order as they move on to the next agenda item. The various village representatives sit around a long, ornate table, listening quietly to the proceedings. The former lord, looking incredibly intense with glowing eyes, explains that they must coordinate their upcoming birthday gifts so they don't overlap. An elderly village head agrees that they need to reach a proper agreement this time to avoid last year's embarrassing overlap. Another bald village head, head casually suggests a cockfight to settle things fairly. However, he gets immediately called out for smoking right next to someone in a non-smoking area. As the other leaders shout out their meat offerings, Dominic sighs at how unproductive the meeting is, realizing the former lord must be crazy about meat. Dominic recalls rumors that the former lord rarely goes outside because he is close to becoming a swordmaster. Their thoughts are interrupted when a maid opens the door, inviting the village heads to have their meal first. Dominic gets incredibly excited to finally taste the castle's food, wondering what kind of fancy spices the nobles use. Following the others, Dominic plans to subtly ask for the recipe if the food is as good as rumored. Suddenly, Dominic is startled when the maid peeks back at him with an intense gaze. Upon entering the dining hall, Dominic is absolutely blown away by the massive feast laid out before him, immediately noting how savory the bread is thanks to the high-quality flour. He happily digs in, taking a big bite of the fresh bread. Next, he tries the seafood stew, finding it a bit salty but loving how the shrimp and clams bring out the rich flavor of the sea. But the absolute highlight of the entire spread is the sizzling tripe. The chef notices his excitement and asks if he has tried tripe before, to which Dominic enthusiastically replies that he can never get enough of it. Dominic points out that it has been prepped perfectly to avoid any bad smell, which makes the chef laugh proudly and admit he handles all the meat prep himself. Flattered by the praise, the chef explains that his skills improved so much because the former lord is a massive meat lover who eats absolutely everything. The chef then offers him some freshly grilled tripe to try, and Dominic is absolutely thrilled to get some free food. While they eat, the chef mentions that everyone is picking out birthday gifts for the former lord, and asks if his village has chosen anything yet. Dominic explains that since all the other villages already claimed the meat options, he is not quite sure what they should bring. The chef thinks about it for a moment, trying to come up with a good alternative. He brightly suggests that Dominic's village should offer a barrel of liquor instead of meat. Dominic is skeptical because their village beer is not high quality, but the chef reassures him that true alcohol lovers do not care about brands, especially since the former lord has a massive collection. Dominic realizes the former lord must be a heavy drinker and thanks the chef for the tip, happily accepting even more free tripe in the process. With the gift settled, Dominic casually remarks that eating like that every day will give the former lord gout, leaving the chef completely confused about what gout even is. He starts explaining how the condition works, describing it as a painful illness that starts in the toes when uric acid builds up. He warns that eating foods high in purine is a terrible idea, but quickly apologizes when he notices the chef's intense glare. The chef tells him to stop talking nonsense about purines and just eat, leaving him with no choice but to agree. Chewing his food, Dominic laments that his nutritional knowledge from his past life is completely useless here and only gets him treated like a fraud. Walking down the grand hallway, he sighs and tells himself he needs to fix his habit of over-explaining things. He tries to look on the bright side since he got to eat his fill of tripe, but suddenly senses something is very wrong. Suddenly he is muffled and grabbed from behind in the dark hallway. Dominic slowly opens his eyes, groaning in pain as he tries to process what just happened. He finds himself lying face down on the cold floor, surrounded by mysterious cloaked figures. One of the captors orders another to sling the unconscious young man over his shoulder. Dominic suddenly gasps for air as he wakes up and a voice notes he has finally come to. He winces in discomfort, trying to get his bearings in the unfamiliar room. The former lord apologizes, explaining his subordinates misunderstood his orders and brought him here way too roughly. Dominic laughs it off politely, but internally panics, realizing he has been kidnapped right inside the lord's castle. He notes the armed guards behind the man, knowing one wrong move could cost him his life. When Dominic casually asks how he should address him, one of the guards instantly snaps at his insolence. A young man in a blue cape yells in outrage, calling the prisoner incredibly disrespectful. Suddenly, a low, menacing voice cuts in and tells him to shut up. The man with the dark beard demands that he stop yelling immediately. He looks absolutely miserable, with tears streaming down his face from intense pain. He groans that the loud noise is literally making his bones vibrate. The speaker apologizes for being late to introduce himself to his guest. He formally introduces himself as Theodore Sinclair, the former lord of the territory. Dominic flinches, his eyes wide with shock and a bead of sweat on his cheek. Dominic accidentally yells out his title, only to get scolded again for making noise. He starts putting the pieces together about why the former lord is in so much pain. Dominic asks if it could be gout, and Theodore confirms that is indeed what they call it. Theodore asks if he knows about the curse, leaving Dominic completely baffled that he thinks gout is magic. The young man is completely stunned to hear that the elder lord actually has gout, and the old man casually confirms it. But then the elder lord leans in close, asking if he knows anything about this curse that someone supposedly cast on him. The young man can only stare back in utter disbelief at what he just heard. He can't believe this guy thinks gout is a curse, when it's obviously just uric acid buildup from eating greasy food and drinking alcohol every single day. He worries that if he just blurts out that it's a common medical condition, the Lord will think he's a total fraud or a dark sorcerer. But then he stops and realizes that if the Lord actually suspected him of being evil, He'd be rotting in a dungeon right now instead of sitting in a nice bedroom. Looking closely at the Elder Lord, the young man notices how tense and worn down the old warrior really looks. He realizes this powerful man is just completely desperate to find any kind of relief from his agonizing pain. So he gently asks if the pain starts with sudden swelling and sharp aches in his toes or ankles, making the Lord immediately lean forward in suspense. He goes on to describe how the pain peaks at night, makes even a light breeze feel like torture, and then suddenly vanishes, which the sweating Lord confirms is exactly what happens. With absolute confidence, the young man looks him in the eye and declares that this isn't a curse at all, but a medical condition called gout. The old warrior is completely stunned to hear that his agonizing condition isn't actually a curse. He demands to know what is causing it then, and the young man explains that it all comes down to his diet. He starts explaining that there is a compound called purine found in large amounts in certain foods. He simplifies it, saying fatty foods leave behind nutrients that build up and cause pain starting from the toes. The former Lord wonders why this is happening now after a lifetime of eating this way, so Dominic suggests his aging digestive system is finally struggling. Dominic modestly adds that he is not a physician, which immediately makes the other young man in the room highly suspicious. The young man wonders how a non-physician could possibly know so much about such a rare condition. Realizing he needs to cover his tracks, Dominic claims his traveling master taught him that the right ingredients make food act as medicine. He goes on about 5 vital energies in the world, explaining that eating in harmony with them brings a long, healthy life. Elder Lord wonders if those energies refer to mana elements, and asks for the name of this wise master. As the Lord ponders the concept, Dominic starts to sweat and slowly utters the last part of the name. Dominic bursts into dramatic fake tears, crying out that his beloved master was the legendary Hyojun. Hearing the unusual name, the Elder Lord assumes those tears mean the young man studied under some legendary elven master. Meanwhile, the protagonist secretly congratulates himself on how smoothly his dramatic lie went over. Since the young man isn't an official doctor, the old lord tries to figure out another role for him in the castle. With a dramatic flair, Theodore Sinclair commands that the young man will now be in charge of his meals. Theodore Sinclair explains he wants to see if Han Young-min is just a smooth talker or truly has elven knowledge, leaving the young man completely baffled. The scene shifts to the grand castle exterior under a bright sky. Walking down the hallway, Han Young-min wonders what to do next, though he feels confident about his past experience in a hospital cafeteria. He reasons that preparing meals for a patient is not something that worries him. However, Han Jung-min panics because he has never done personalized nutrition planning for a VIP before. He realizes this requires proper consulting to match the budget, immediately ruling out fatty cuts and alcohol, while hoping the Lord will accept vegetables. Han Young-min decides to head to the kitchen to investigate, but is suddenly stopped by Sir Knight. The sudden voice startles Han Young-min, making him jump in surprise. Spinning around, he is startled to find the blonde warrior standing right behind him. He asks if the knight has been standing there the whole time, but the stoic man claims he is just attending to the Elder Lord day and night, which, the young man quickly realizes, is actually surveillance. He explains that he needs to know the Lord's lifestyle, and meet the physician, and cook to plan the diet, but the knight immediately shuts him down. Han Young-min can only stare back in utter shock at the sudden refusal. Sir Knight coldly explains that all of that is classified information and an outsider shouldn't know it, leaving Han Jung-min complaining about how incredibly stubborn this guy is. When Han Young-min protests that he has orders to make a meal plan, Sir Knight dismisses it as a joke and tells him to just hand over a list of healthy foods. So Han Young-min gives up and decides any consequences are on them. Sir Knight scoffs internally, wondering how on earth simple food could ever cure a real medical condition. But before he can walk away, Han Jung-min calls out to him. He asks the knight if he would change his mind if food actually eases the Lord's condition, declaring that food is much more than just a meal to some people. Sir Knight stares at him in silence, completely taken aback by his intense determination. The blonde warrior admits his determination is impressive, but clarifies that food is not medicine and warns him not to get in his way, though the young man's tone is getting a bit cheeky. He calmly replies that he doesn't think his tone is impertinent at all. The knight just scoffs in irritation at his lack of respect. Dominic reminds himself that even though this guy is a knight, he is the Elder Lord's guest, so there is no reason to let himself be intimidated. Suddenly, Sir Knight stops him with his sword, demanding to know where he is going, which scares Dominic into stammering that he is just heading to the kitchen. Sir Knight deadpans that the kitchen is actually in the complete opposite direction. Once they arrive, the head cook is shocked to see the quack snake oil salesman alive and back in his domain. Dominic tries to laugh it off as a misunderstanding, while the head cook notes he thought the knights had scared him off for good, asking what brings him back. Dominic drops the bombshell that he has been put in charge of the Elder Lord's meals for now. The head cook immediately panics, grabbing Dominic by the collar and crying that this rat is trying to steal his job and ruin his family, forcing Dominic to desperately explain he is only there as an assistant to help sort ingredients. Even so, the young man is shocked to find out he is technically subordinate to the head cook, realizing even castle kitchens have a strict hierarchy. The chef questions why they need to sort ingredients when everything sent to the Lord is already top quality, but the young man explains he needs to filter out what specifically harms the Elder Lord's unique constitution. Sir Knight is skeptical about food matching a person's constitution, but the young man cleverly compares it to how different types of mana energy suit different knights, which the warrior has to admit is true. Dominic points out that since crops absorb the world's mana as they grow, their effects will naturally vary from person to person. The head cook is completely won over by this logic and realizes Dominic will be handpicking the ingredients from now on, earning a smug compliment from the young nutritionist. Dominic sweat drops as he realizes nutritional science is basically non-existent in this fantasy world. Knowing scientific terms would only confuse them, Dominic keeps up the mana analogy and asks if the Elder Lord was an elite knight in his prime, which Sir Knight proudly confirms. Sir Knight explains that while the retired lord still trains privately, his current workload is nothing compared to his intense active duty days. Dominic asks about the lord's food intake, and the head cook confirms that according to the senior butler, the old man's massive appetite hasn't changed at all despite his retirement. Hearing this, the young man points out that the Elder Lord eats way too much for a normal person, which explains why he has been bulking up lately. He notes that the man is a massive eater who only consumes meat, which makes Sir Knight realize the pattern. The knight adds that whenever the Lord feels sick, he intentionally stuffs himself with even more meat. Han Young-min is left completely speechless by this absurd revelation. He loses his mind, screaming in disbelief at how insane that logic is. The head cook defends the habit, claiming everyone knows you need hearty meat and fish to fight off an illness. Han Young-min snaps back that it is actually the perfect way to make things worse, though it worked when the Lord was active. But after retirement, that stubborn belief is exactly what triggered his current health disaster. Han Young-min bans all red meat, alcohol, and heavy food, leaving the panicked cook praying for mercy. He suddenly grabs the head cook by the hands to get his full attention. With an intense look, he begs the cook to trust him on this. He warns that his very life is on the line if this diet plan fails. Outside, a heavy rain begins to fall, soaking the tall grass. The storm beats against the windows of the grand estate. By that evening, the downpour completely drenches the entire mansion. Inside, Elder Lord stares down in absolute disbelief, demanding to know if this pathetic excuse for a dish is actually supposed to be his meal. Outside, a heavy rain pours down on the grand mansion as someone inside tries to make sense of the situation. A dark silhouette stands in the doorway, casting a tense vibe over the room. The Elder Lord stares down in absolute shock, completely horrified by what is on his plate. He clenches his fist in anger, demanding to know why his daily feast is missing his beloved meat and whiskey. He looks down at the table, completely baffled by the unfamiliar healthy dishes laid out before him. But his children quickly chime in, praising the beautiful, vibrant colors of the fresh food. Caught off guard by their enthusiasm, the Elder Lord decides he might as well give it a try. Taking a sip, he immediately notices there is absolutely no alcohol in his glass today. Realizing it is actually pomegranate juice, his daughter smiles and says the tart flavor really wakes up her appetite. To everyone's surprise, the Elder Lord admits that the drink is actually not bad at all. He is deeply impressed by the complex wine-like flavor, completely unaware that this healthy juice is doing wonders for his body. He then prepares himself for the next dish on the menu. Staring down at the plate, he is completely baffled by what has been served. Han Young-min explains that it is a mix of chopped mushrooms, asparagus, and broccoli sautéed in olive oil and simmered with fresh milk and heavy cream. With a polite gesture, the young chef confidently asks him to give it a try. The Elder Lord hesitantly takes a spoonful of the steaming green soup. As soon as he swallows it, his eyes widen in absolute shock. Seeing his sudden reaction, his worried children immediately call out to him. The head cook panics, demanding to know what Han Young-min did to the food. The Elder Lord silences everyone, completely amazed by the rich, velvety flavor and the intense taste of the healthy vegetable soup. He looks up and gives Han Young-min a rare word of praise. Han Young-min sweats a bit, joking that he was worried he might lose his head if the Lord wasn't satisfied. Relieved to have survived the first round, the young chef announces that the main dish is up next. A maid wheels in the food cart while he and the head cook watch with anticipation. The young chef tells himself that it is finally time to drive the point home with this dish. The lady of the house looks on with a mix of surprise and curiosity as the food is presented. The Elder Lord reaches out to lift the silver dome covering his plate. He announces that the dish is a cod steak elevated with 5 different herbs. The low-fat, high-protein cod steak is presented as a powerhouse for fatigue recovery, energy, and immunity. The Elder Lord mutters to himself, noting that it is a fish steak. He cuts into it, wondering if the outside has been fried. He takes a bite and is absolutely blown away by how crispy the outside is, while the inside remains incredibly moist. The son begs his father to stop eating so aggressively, while Dominic just smiles, pleased with the reaction. The Elder Lord happily digs in, noting how long it has been since he had a meal so easy on his stomach. The satisfied Lord sits back with his arms crossed, declaring the meal to be quite satisfying. Han Young-min lets out a sigh of relief, glad he survived, and thinking that avoiding a full vegetarian spread was the right call. But his relief is cut short, as the Elder Lord suddenly speaks up again with a grim look. The Elder Lord points out they still do not know if this diet will actually help his condition, quickly calling out to Ian. He explains with a dark expression that they cannot have their guest wandering around the massive castle all night, so he strictly orders Ian to make sure their guest does not take a single step outside. Han Youngmin freezes in panic as the guards immediately call out to him, realizing he is in trouble. Just like that, he finds himself carried away and placed under house arrest once again. Outside, a heavy rain begins to pour down over the massive castle courtyard. The rain beats heavily against the large glass windows of the dark estate. Inside his dark bedroom, the Elder Lord sits up in bed, unable to sleep. As night falls again, he anxiously wonders just how long and painful this night will drag on. He lies awake, dreading the agonizing foot pain that usually hits him every single evening. To make matters worse, he realizes he can no longer rely on strong whiskey to drown out his fears. Knowing that backing out now would ruin his pride, he decides he might as well force himself to sleep. But as he closes his eyes, he suddenly notices something strange. He wonders why his bed feels so incredibly comfortable and soft tonight, when lately it has been pure torture. He reflects on how satisfying his dinner was, leaving him completely full without any of the usual painful bloating. After years of heavy meat and alcohol, he admits that today's light vegetable-focused meal felt absolutely perfect. He finally realizes that meat and vegetables must work together in harmony, admitting he had grown far too stubborn. Suddenly the scene shifts to a bright sunny sky with birds chirping. A beautiful blue butterfly flutters gracefully over a peaceful garden. Dominic watches the butterfly land on his finger, whispering about how free it is. He sighs, wishing he could fly just as freely as that little insect. But the reality is that Dominic is stuck sitting in a wheelchair. He playfully orders Ian to push him so he can follow the butterfly. Ian is absolutely seething with rage, barely holding back his temper. Ian snaps and yells at Dominic to move the wheelchair himself, but Dominic yells right back. Dominic complains that they are stuck here because the Elder Lord went into training. Since Dominic is still doing his job, he demands that a furious Ian keep pushing. The knight reluctantly pushes him in his wheelchair through the beautiful sunlit castle gardens. Dominic asks what secluded training actually does, and Ian explains it is the best way to gain enlightenment without any distractions. Dominic addresses the knight to ask another question as they keep moving. Dominic compares it to a wuxia novel and asks how long this training usually takes. Ian says it varies, but it can take years, which completely shocks Dominic. Dominic panics at the thought of waiting years while Ian remains completely silent. Ian looks down with a dark, exhausted expression on his face. A blonde man pushes a wheelchair toward a mansion as leaves swirl in the wind. Dominic asks if the Elder Lord's message actually ordered him to be locked up. Dominic points out there was no such order, and that he already prepared meal plans for the cook. Dominic reasons that as long as he does not run away, everything should be fine. Ian stops in his tracks, wide-eyed with sudden realization. By that afternoon, the situation at the castle changes. Dominic is officially permitted to return home, provided he sends detailed weekly meal plans for the Elder Lord. He is absolutely thrilled about his new job, thinking of it as a quick, easy business trip that pays in gold. Ian immediately tells him to pack up because it is time to leave, and Dominic happily complies. As they get ready, someone spots the luggage and asks where they are going. Dominic casually mentions they are heading to Evergreen, which catches the other person's attention. Suddenly, Dominic freezes in shock as a dark, intense aura fills the room. With a terrifyingly cold expression, Ian reveals he was ordered to watch Dominic closely so he doesn't escape. Dominic points ahead, happily showing Sir Knight that they have finally reached Evergreen. Sir Knight sighs and reminds him for the 100th time that it is just a simple fishing village by the sea. But Dominic suddenly stops in his tracks, looking surprised by something ahead. An older villager carrying a net spots them and yells out to Chief Callan that the kid made it back alive, though Dominic wonders if they expected him to be a corpse. The villager says it is good he is back anyway, and immediately tells him to get over and help, leaving Dominic completely confused. The old man frantically yells that the devil's hand has appeared in the sea, making Dominic ask what that even is. Sir Knight gasps in absolute horror at the name, while Dominic feels totally left out of the loop. Dominic asks if the plant is growing wild, but the villager explains that a swarm of farmer turtles has arrived and already laid eggs on the beach. Sir Knight groans that this is the absolute worst-case scenario, leaving Dominic still completely clueless. Sir Knight is shocked that the village chief does not know this, but Dominic mutters that he is not actually a fisherman and never wanted to be chief anyway. Sir Knight explains that the devil's hand is actually a sea plant cultivated by those farmer turtles. The village head explains that massive sea trees and aggressive farmer turtles are completely ruining their fishing waters. Sir Knight finds it strange since these turtles usually avoid human beaches, but Kalan laughs it off. The old man cheerfully admits he got scammed on the land deal when founding the village, having no idea they would show up. Dominic and Sir Knight stare at him in deadpan silence, completely unamused by his terrible joke. Waves crash against the rocky shore as they make their way down to the water. The chief leads them to a high vantage point to get a better look at the sea. Sir Knight observes the massive shadows underwater, noting the sheer number of turtles and fully grown devil's hands. Dominic thinks the ocean looks perfectly peaceful, but Sir Knight tells him to look much closer. Dominic squints and focuses his gaze on the sparkling blue water below. The clear, bright waves ripple gently under the sunlight. Sir Knight gets frustrated when Dominic sees nothing, pointing out the dark shapes spreading everywhere. Dominic looks closely at the terrifying plants and realizes they are just seaweed. He looks out over the water, completely puzzled by what he is hearing. While Sir Knight insists it is called the Devil's Hand, Dominic argues that back home they just call it seaweed. Looking at the thick patch of seaweed below, the young man drools, thinking about how perfect it would be for a hot bowl of soup. Sir Knight is absolutely horrified at the mere suggestion of eating something with such a cursed name. Dominic just looks at him blankly, wondering why on earth they would think it is not edible. Sir Knight states the obvious reason is the name itself, but the village chief suddenly chimes in, realizing they never actually tried eating it. Sir Knight stares in shock as the realization hits the old villager. Dominic eagerly offers to cook some for the chief, who is thrilled at the chance to taste his cooking again. Sir Knight stands there completely speechless, questioning the sanity of everyone in this village. They head inside, stepping into a warm wooden building. Dominic is glad to be back, while Sir Knight admits the small village kitchen is surprisingly well organized. Dominic proudly takes credit for the setup, prompting Sir Knight to make a sarcastic comment under his breath. Sir Knight watches as Dominic hangs up his coat, asking what they should do next. The chief brings out a bunch of dried seaweed, complaining it was stored wrong, but Dominic is thrilled to see it dried perfectly. As he holds the dried seaweed, the head cook remains skeptical about how something so dry and crumbly could possibly be any good. But Dominic explains that this dried seaweed, which they call Devil's Hand, actually packs way more umami flavor once it is dried and rehydrated. With the ingredients ready, the young chef rolls up his sleeves and gets pumped to start cooking. He is totally ready to show off his culinary skills after being away from the kitchen for so long. He starts off with the basics, finally mincing up some fresh garlic on the cutting board. Next, he slices the green onions, heats up a pot and drizzles in some perilla oil to stir-fry the mussels, seaweed, and garlic together. The rich aroma immediately catches the attention of Sir Knight, who has never smelled anything like it but is already drooling. Dominic notices him staring and glances over, catching the Knight completely off guard. Dominic smiles to himself, feeling that all the hard work he put into making Korean seasonings from scratch was totally worth it. He notices there is not much rice left, but decides to be extra generous with the portions anyway. He looks over at Sir Knight, amused by how the guy is trying so hard to look indifferent, while constantly sneaking glances. Since Dominic cannot beat the Knight in a fight, he figures this is the perfect way to finally get back at him. But Sir Knight freaks out when he sees what Dominic is doing, and demands to know what is going on. He gets furious when Sir Knight accuses him of using wastewater, explaining that rice water is actually the golden rule for soup. The guard is completely baffled by the explanation, but Dominic tells him he has been deceived his whole life. The young man sighs quietly as he continues preparing the meal. Dominic addresses Sir Knight, acknowledging that unlike other knights, he does not look down on commoners. He points out how the knight treats him without reservations, and shows genuine respect to Chief Callan. However, Dominic gently notes that the knight is still far too rigid. Dominic suggests that the knight should try a different approach. He encourages him to focus on observing and accepting people for who they are. Village head Callan walks in holding a freshly fried fish, suggesting it is all about cultural differences. Dominic happily thanks him and tells him to sit down quickly since the rice is ready. Sir Knight takes a spoonful of the hot soup to taste it. The knight is instantly shocked by how incredibly delicious the soup tastes. He is completely blown away by the soup, wondering if this incredible dish was really made from the dreaded Devil's Hand, as he finds himself unable to resist taking another bite. Sir Knight realizes his hands and mouth are moving completely on their own, completely possessed by the delicious flavor. A blonde man holds a spoonful of rice and seaweed up to his wide-open mouth. He continues to stuff his face while Dominic watches him, with a satisfied, knowing look. Dominic asks the chief how he likes it, and the old man happily admits it is amazing and demands another bowl. While serving, Dominic complains about how expensive rice is before asking the chief what they should do about the seaweed roots once the turtles are gone. Dominic points out that the chief just admitted the weed is absolutely delicious. He smugly asks if they are really going to throw away something that tastes this good, leaving the chief and Sir Knight speechless. As a merchant carriage rolls along, a young merchant traveling with his grandfather asks if they really have to stop by this place. He complains that the tiny village looks like it has absolutely nothing to sell, but his grandfather chuckles and tells him not to judge a book by its cover. The wise old merchant explains that this little fishing village might grow into something huge someday, and a small trading company like theirs must value every single customer. The young merchant smiles and agrees, but then he suddenly pauses, realizing that the name Evergreen sounds a bit strange for a fishing village. He keeps thinking about how unfitting the name is under the bright blue sky. Just then, Dominic waves happily as he spots the old merchant arriving. Anton greets Grandpa warmly as the chief, but Grandpa immediately tells him to stop using that title, since he dumped all the annoying work on Dominic. The old merchant laughs at Grandpa's usual antics and offers to sell 3 sacks of rice, which Grandpa gladly agrees to buy. Dominic cuts in with a bright grin, asking if they have eaten yet. Moments later, Kalan stares down at a bowl of dark green soup, asking Grandpa what this strange black stuff is. Grandpa explains it is some kind of seaweed and tells him to just eat up because it will do wonders for his digestion. He eagerly urges the old merchant to try the soup, promising it has a much deeper flavor than any regular seafood stew. Taking a bite, the elderly traveler is shocked to realize this rich depth isn't coming from meat at all, but from the strange black ingredient. His business instincts immediately kick in, screaming at him that they have just hit the absolute jackpot with this dish. When he asks if there is a more common name for this seaweed, the local village head hesitantly reveals that everyone else calls it the devil's hand. The shocking revelation causes the old merchant to drop his spoon right onto the grass in sheer disbelief. While the old man panics over eating such a dreadful spawn of evil, Anton suddenly chimes in, eagerly offering to buy and trade for it. The merchant calls out to Anton, realizing that since unusual ingredients like monster meat are popular in the capital, this delicious seaweed could actually sell. Dominic smiles confidently, agreeing that there is massive business potential waiting to be tapped here. The merchant stares at him in surprise, taken aback by the young man's sharp business sense. Seeing his determination, the grandfather gives his blessing to go ahead and sell it, earning a joyful thank you from Dominic. With the deal approved, the merchant turns back to the villagers to get down to business. Anton leans in with a wild, greedy grin, asking exactly how much they can prepare, promising that quantity won't be an issue. A few days later, the scene shifts to the bustling market. A local villager sighs deeply, looking exhausted and weighed down by worry for his family. The husband, looking to buy seaweed for his wife, explains that she hasn't recovered her strength since giving birth. He sniffs the air suddenly, catching a surprising scent drifting through the market. He wonders what that delicious smell is as it completely grabs his attention. Nearby, Anton stands on a wooden crate, calling out to the crowd to try a sample. Anton shouts through a megaphone, explaining that this seaweed soup is made from the devil's hand. The worried husband stands frozen in shock as he hears that it is perfect for new mothers. He immediately buys a box and carries it back home, feeling hopeful. His wife, the new mother holding her baby, asks him what he brought home. He reassures her that the seller even taught him how to cook it properly. Back at the market, Anton keeps shouting, offering free perilla oil with every cheap purchase. Anton spots another customer in the crowd and calls out to get their attention. The grateful husband rushes over, shouting that the seaweed worked wonders for his wife, and demanding to buy 3 more sets immediately. As other buyers clamor to get some for themselves, the young seller grins, realizing he is going to sell out completely and needs to restock fast. Back in the kitchen, Dominic chuckles to himself as the villagers wonder how their young chief knows so much. He dances with joy, thrilled that he can finally afford to make teobaki now that he has some resources. He smiles contentedly, glad the seaweed sold so well, and hoping life will get a bit easier from here on. Suddenly, Sir Knight warns him that the pot is boiling over, sending him scrambling in a panic. Sir Knight comments on the strong, spicy aroma, and Dominic happily offers him a bite of the freshly made dish. A steaming, delicious bowl of red teobaki sits ready on the table. The two of them sit down together, eagerly thanking each other before digging into the hot meal. Dominic lifts a perfectly coated rice cake on his fork, ready to take his very first bite. Suddenly a messenger bursts through the door, loudly demanding that the village head heed the Lord's command, drawing tense, silent stares from the entire room. The messenger unfurls an official scroll, announcing a declaration from the Count, the Lord of the land. He reads the summons aloud, stating that Dominic must come to Sinclair Castle immediately, and that soldiers have been sent to fetch him. The messenger adds a stern warning that any refusal to comply will absolutely not be tolerated. Hearing this, Sir Knight steps in, asserting that he also has direct orders from the Lord to look after Dominic. Sir Knight demands to know what on earth is going on, determined to find out the reason behind this sudden summons. The messenger replies that lowly soldiers only follow orders without questioning their lord's intentions, but confirms there must not be a moment's delay. Sir Knight pauses to think, carefully weighing the situation in his head. He suddenly tells them to take Dominic and declares he will go along, leaving Dominic shocked that his dining buddy is giving him up so easily. Sir Knight sighs at Dominic's lack of foresight, explaining that if there were a real problem, the Lord would have punished him on the spot instead of calling him back. Dominic desperately begs to at least finish his meal, but Sir Knight tells him he can always cook more later and orders him to get moving. Dominic stares in disbelief at what is left on the table. He silently grumbles that it is easy for Sir Knight to say that, considering the knight already finished his own plate in record time. A voice echoes through the grand estate, summoning the young village head to enter. The massive doors swing open as he and Sir Knight walk side by side into the hall. They look visibly tense as they step further inside, feeling the heavy atmosphere of the castle. They walk down the long blue carpet toward the throne where the Lord sits, waiting. Sitting on the throne is Patrick Sinclair, the Count and current Lord of the territory. Dominic and Sir Knight immediately drop to their knees in greeting, prompting the Count to tell them to raise their heads. As they look up, Dominic desperately hopes that whatever is happening involves delicious tteokbokki. The Count stands up and mentions he heard Dominic is the one supplying a certain item. He holds up a dark, slimy plant and asks if farmer turtles really go crazy for this devil's hand. Dominic starts sweating bullets, realizing he has never actually seen them eat it and panicking that his fake advertising has been exposed. The Count holds up the dark seaweed, skeptically asking if farmer turtles really go crazy for this so-called devil's hand. Dominic sweat drops, silently admitting he has never actually seen a turtle eat it, but he shamelessly claims it is a custom in his homeland to feed it to new mothers. The Count is intrigued, noting that Dominic has seemed unusual ever since he took charge of his father's meals. He then turns to Hanover, asking the stoic knight how Dominic has behaved in his eyes. Dominic frantically whispers to Hanover to say something nice, desperately bribing him with thoughts of delicious tteokbokki. Hanover calmly closes his eyes, praising Dominic for being incredibly knowledgeable about ingredients and having an unbiased view of the world. He adds that Dominic has the courage to stand by his convictions and balances ideals with reality, making him useful in any position. The Count is delighted to hear such high praise from the picky knight, feeling there is nothing left to doubt. He then reveals with a smile that his wife recently gave birth to a precious son. Dominic is caught off guard but quickly stammers out his congratulations to the Lord. The Count sighs, explaining that his wife hasn't left her room in 2 days, and asks Dominic to take charge of her postnatal care. Dominic is left completely stunned, realizing he just got an unexpected on-the-spot job offer. Excited about the opportunity, he immediately asks for a gold coin per week, but the lady of the house instantly shuts him down with a sharp refusal. Hanover tries to step in and reason with her, but she only grows angrier about being offered a mere cook, leaving the young man to mourn his lost pay. As they walk away, he asks the knight if she has always been this sensitive, but his companion admits he has never personally attended her before. The maid Emily apologizes, explaining that the Countess simply has no appetite, and promises to report the situation to the Count. Emily mentions the Countess has stayed in her room since giving birth, which puzzles Dominic since she is still eating seaweed soup. Suddenly, a realization hits Dominic as he connects the clues. He remembers when his sister gave birth back then. In the memory, Dominic stood there in silence as he visited her. His mind flashes back to a postnatal care, drinking pumpkin juice to help with her recovery. His sister turned around and welcomed him warmly. She was so swollen she was barely recognizable, leading Dominic to realize the Countess is likely suffering from severe postnatal edema. He points out that the lady is badly swollen, which completely catches the maid off guard. The young man explains that her body is storing water and fat for milk production, and that a proper diet is key to her recovery. Confident in his skills, he offers to help her manage the swelling. Emily looks surprised and asks him to wait a moment before she goes inside. Dominic analyzes the situation, noting that the lady has been inactive since giving birth and used to eat salty meals with the elder lord. Hanover mentions that he always highlighted Dominic's strengths rather than his flaws when speaking to his father. He encourages Dominic to use those strengths to resolve this issue and tells him to do his best. He jokingly asks if they are suddenly friends because of the tteokbokki, prompting Hanover to sigh and regret speaking. The door opens as they prepare to meet the lady of the house. Emily invites them in, and Monica welcomes Dominic, expressing her trust in him since he managed her father's meals. Dominic immediately realizes the severity of the situation, noting how much her self-esteem must have suffered. He worries that postpartum depression might set in, which would make things much worse. She explains that she has already been cutting back on food, but the weight just won't come off. Clutching her dress in frustration, she asks if she should eat even less, but he completely catches her off guard by telling her that she actually must eat. She immediately snaps at him, asking if he is mocking her by telling her to eat more to lose weight. Dominic calmly explains that the food he is prescribing is just like medicine to help her recover. He asks her to promise that she will follow his prescribed meal plan exactly. Realizing she has no other options, Monica reluctantly agrees to trust him. She gives him a 3-week deadline before she must attend a public blessing ceremony. Dominic confidently accepts the challenge, promising it won't be a problem. Later, Dominic begins planning how to tackle her diet. He notes that while her swelling can subside quickly, he cannot compromise on high nutrition. Patrick Sinclair asks if his wife's condition is more serious than the Elder Lord's was. Dominic explains that the Elder Lord's gout was actually easier to treat because the problem was so clear-cut. He sighs as they walk, explaining how tough it is to help her lose weight while keeping her energy up for breastfeeding. The knight stops and asks if they can't just tackle those problems one at a time, catching him completely off guard. The blonde man explains that during training, he always focuses on the next task and reaches his goals step by step. He wonders if that simple approach wouldn't work here, making Dominic realize he has been overcomplicating things. Dominic decides to put the final goal aside for now and focus entirely on reducing the lady's swelling first. With a clear diet plan set, he begrudgingly admits that Hanover can actually be helpful sometimes. The next morning, a maid announces to Lady Monica that it is time for breakfast. Monica stares at the unusual spread while her maid Emily explains that Dominic insisted she drink a special tea after every meal. Emily serves her a cup of boiled pumpkin water, noting she has to drink it after meals and before bed to reduce swelling. Though Monica has no idea what any of this food is, she decides to just dig in and taste it. She takes a bite of the food while Emily stands by, watching her reaction closely. With a puzzled look, Monica asks Emily if her taste buds are messed up because the food tastes incredibly bland. The maid explains that he lightly seasoned the food on purpose to help her postpartum swelling go down much faster. Feeling completely full and satisfied for the first time in days, she yawns and decides it is time for a nice nap. But her maid hesitantly interrupts her. The maid delivers the bad news that Dominic ordered her to take a light 30-minute walk after every single meal. Though she complains, she begrudgingly accepts it since she did promise to follow his instructions. She drags her feet outside, completely out of breath and questioning her terrible stamina. She is relieved when Emily mentions her bath is finally ready. But just as she starts to relax, the maid nervously adds that there is yet another rule. Emily reveals that Dominic strictly forbade long baths, limiting her soak to a mere 10 minutes. She curses Dominic in frustration, devastated that her only remaining joy in life has been stripped away. After her brief bath, she steps out wearing a robe and a towel wrapped around her head. Emily immediately guides her to the next step of the recovery plan, which is a massage. With a polite but slightly menacing smile, the maid warns her that she will have to endure some serious pain. Tearing up in sheer dread, she vows that if she does not recover after putting up with all of Dominic's strict rules, she will make him pay. Suddenly, a voice calls out his name from outside, startling him just as he is about to enjoy a delicious bite of food. The kitchen door swings open to reveal the unexpected visitor standing before the surprised cooks. It is Count Patrick Sinclair himself, calmly asking if he is interrupting their little gathering. With a charming smile, Patrick admits the delicious aroma drew him in and asks if he can have a taste too. Count Patrick Sinclair recalls that he first met his wife at a grand banquet after his father returned from the capital. He remembers catching her eye across the crowded, elegant ballroom. She looked back at him with a gentle, curious gaze. It was absolute love at first sight for both of them. Before long, they vowed to spend their lives together and happily married, a beautiful memory he still laughs about today. When his father retired, Patrick Sinclair inherited the castle and soon learned his wife was pregnant, leaving him incredibly busy but still deeply devoted to her. But suddenly that perfect, loving memory shatters into pieces. He screams in frustration, demanding to know why his wife is always so angry with him now. He genuinely has no idea what he did that was so wrong. Ventilating at a tavern, Patrick Sinclair complains that her wild mood swings are impossible to keep up with, before snapping that his single friends wouldn't understand. Dominic calmly points out that she is probably just stressed about the upcoming blessing ceremony, though he recalls she was also very emotional when they first met. Even so, Dominic looks down thoughtfully, preparing to deliver some honest truth to the stressed-out lord. While they share a drink, Dominic suddenly addresses the stressed-out lord. He asks him with a knowing smile if he still loves his wife. Ian Hanover looks on, dryly questioning if that is supposed to be comforting. Time flies by, and the day of the grand blessing ceremony finally arrives. Arriving at the venue, Anton is amazed by the massive crowd gathered outside. He notes that tons of high-ranking nobles have shown up for the lord's son. Nearby, some noblewomen are already whispering, wondering how much the countess has changed. They gossip maliciously, eager to see her look bloated and miserable after giving birth. Overhearing them, Anton and Ian sweat drop, noting how some people only care about drama. Ian turns to Dominic, asking if he is really this relaxed about the situation. He points out it has been 3 weeks, wondering if the countess actually got results. Dominic confidently shrugs it off, though Ian accuses him of just shifting the blame. He smiles confidently, explaining that he trusts her because she has incredible willpower and they have already fixed her diet. He adds that since the swelling came on so quickly, it should also disappear just as fast. Ian listens quietly, looking thoughtful as he processes these words. Ian Hanover repeats the word trust to himself as the church bells begin to ring loudly. Inside the grand cathedral, the high priest loudly announces the start of the blessing ceremony. He addresses the crowd, declaring that life is precious and asking everyone to offer their blessings together. Dominic and Ian Hanover stand waiting outside the main hall as the ceremony proceeds. The priest signals for the grand doors to be opened wide. He calls for the Count and Countess Sinclair to make their grand entrance into the hall. The choir begins to sing beautifully as the crowd eagerly awaits the couple. 2 figures slowly walk through the bright doorway, their footsteps echoing in the silent hall. Ian Hanover watches the entrance from a distance, keeping his eyes fixed on the couple. He recalls Dominic's words about having complete trust in the lady's progress. The Count and Lady Sinclair finally step forward, showing off her completely recovered, slender figure. At the grand gathering, the noble guests are absolutely shocked to see how slim she looks so soon after giving birth, whispering in disbelief about how she could have possibly managed it. Some even wonder if she used magic to shed the weight so quickly. But Ian knows that's impossible, since Dominic has absolutely zero talent or affinity for magic. Even so, he can't help but feel there's something deeply unusual about the young man. He senses an incredible weight and confidence behind Dominic's words, wondering where that self-belief even comes from. Ian looks down thoughtfully, trying to process his doubts. He grips his cane tightly as he makes a sudden decision. He announces that as soon as this party is over, he's heading straight back to Evergreen. Dominic is surprised, asking if he's really giving up his lucrative gig as the ladies' diet manager after being so excited about the gold. Ian explains he can easily manage her diet remotely by sending weekly letters, just like he does for the Elder Lord. While his pay might take a small cut, Dominic gets a wild look in his eyes, because he can smell a massive business opportunity brewing. Night falls over the grand estate as the celebration continues under the glowing moon. Inside the brightly lit ballroom, the nobles mingle and laugh, completely unaware of the schemes being cooked up. At the bustling banquet, a noblewoman smiles and chats while holding a glass of wine. Nearby, a red-haired lady looks on with a tense and suspicious expression. She slips away to meet her maid, immediately asking if she found any information. The maid confirms that someone has indeed been hired to professionally manage Lady Sinclair's meals. She explains he is a meal planner living as a chief in a small village. The lady worries that bringing a village chief over might cause trouble with House Sinclair. She realizes that stirring up trouble will only put her back in the rumor mill. Even so, she refuses to give up on this opportunity. She believes that if he helped Lady Sinclair recover, he can surely fix her figure too. She places all her hopes on this mysterious man. Meanwhile, back in the village, Dominic wakes up to a loud knocking at his door. He opens it to find Chief Callan, who tells him to look a bit happier. The old man asks if he wants updates, but Dominic points out he never wrote. The old man drops a massive sack right in front of him, laughing and telling him to open it up. Turns out the seaweed sales money finally came in, and he hands over Dominic's massive share of gold coins. Dominic is surprised to hear that Anton already branched out on his own, and Chief Callan laughs at how bold the kid is. He warmly thanks Dominic, admitting they made way more money from this than they ever did from fishing. Dominic humbly points out he couldn't have done it alone, and credits the entire village fishing union for making it work. The leader walks alongside Dominic as they head deeper into the room. Dominic smiles and says he came at the perfect time, asking him to take a look at something. He rolls out a large map on the table for both of them to study. The leader looks down at the map in complete shock, sweating as he asks what this is about. Dominic gets a confident grin, declaring that if this new plan works, the villagers will never starve again. Dominic and the villagers walk along a beautiful, quiet shoreline with crystal clear water. Kalan explains that the water is too shallow and calm to launch fishing boats, making it a useless dead space only good for kids. But Dominic points out that the lack of turtles and the perfect white sand make this spot absolutely ideal, leaving village confused about his goal. He just flashes a mischievous, knowing grin as he looks out over the ocean. With a bright smile, Dominic announces that they are going to focus entirely on nature and relaxation. He proudly declares that they are going to build a resort, leaving the villagers completely baffled. The bright blue sky stretches overhead as construction noises begin to echo through the area. Ian Hanover arrives at the scene, looking completely bewildered by the sudden commotion. He stares in utter shock at the massive wooden structures being built right on the beach. The workers rally each other with loud shouts to keep up the pace. A heavy hammer strikes a wooden plank with immense force. They hammer away at the wooden frames as the resort quickly begins to take shape. Watching this, the knight spots him tapping sticks together and asks what on earth he is doing, only for Dominic to claim he is supervising. Ian Hanover sighs that he has never met a more annoying supervisor, and tells him to wrap it up and follow him. He explains they are heading to the monthly village chiefs meeting. Inside the grand hall, the meeting moves on to the next item on the agenda. A stern-looking chief explains they will be presenting clothes as a gift for the count's newborn son. Because of that, he warns everyone that they need to avoid picking overlapping colors. The chiefs immediately start bickering over who gets blue, making Dominic wish they would just draw lots and get it over with. Emily enters to announce that the soldiers are training outside and the Lord will be giving a speech before sharing lunch with them, which gets the chiefs excited to join. While the older chiefs celebrate their good luck, Dominic wonders what is so lucky about seeing the Lord's face. He sighs, complaining that they are just going to end up standing there as part of a clapping crowd. Nearby, an elderly bystander watches the exhausted soldier and comments on how brutal their training must be. Another older man scoffs, complaining that with no war going on, today's training is nothing compared to his own glory days. But Dominic notices something is seriously wrong when the soldier suddenly starts vomiting a rainbow. He rushes over to the sick soldier, asking him how long he has been feeling this way. When Dominic asks about other symptoms like fever or chills, the soldier admits his nausea and stomach pain started this morning. The poor soldier looks like he is about to throw up again, right then and there. Dominic is deeply concerned to hear that the symptoms started so early in the day. Later, the head cook spots Dominic and welcomes him warmly. He asks Dominic for a hand with the chief's meeting, but Dominic asks to inspect the kitchen first. The head cook does not mind but wonders if Dominic is searching for something specific, just as Dominic spots what he was looking for. Dominic points to a large wooden crate filled with fresh oysters. When Dominic asks about the oysters, the cook insists they are fresh and iced, but admits he already fed some to Mickey. The head cook explains that Mickey loves shellfish so much. He even volunteered to help just to get a taste of some fresh ceviche. Dominic thinks about how delicious ceviche is, but he knows raw seafood can be incredibly risky. He points out that while coastal people eat raw seafood often, it is exactly how food poisoning happens. The head cook insists he check the ingredients himself, but Dominic firmly states they have gone bad. He looks the cook dead in the eye and diagnoses the issue as shellfish fever. The head cook is completely taken aback by this unfamiliar term. He laughs it off, claiming that shellfish fever only ever happens during the winter. The cook's expression turns cold as he warns Dominic that he is only being patient out of professional courtesy. He glares intensely, clearly unhappy with someone questioning his kitchen's hygiene. He threatens Dominic for causing trouble in his kitchen, but Dominic counters that the bacteria do not care about the season. Dominic explains that it is simply harder to notice in the summer because people naturally avoid eating raw oysters. As Dominic lists Mickey's severe symptoms like vomiting and chills, the head cook panics, realizing the timeline matches perfectly. Dominic points out that since only Mickey is sick, the source of the illness has to be the raw snack he ate a couple of days ago. The head cook breaks into a cold sweat, completely unable to deny the evidence. The chef panics, because this peak heat training is already stressful enough on its own. He trembles with fear, realizing he will be fired, and his wife might actually kill him first. As he worries about going to jail, Dominic steps in and offers to help him out. The chef is stunned, but Dominic flashes a bright smile and says they have history together. The chef is deeply moved and tearfully calls out to his savior, the village chief. Dominic rolls up his sleeves to change the menu quickly, but the chef hesitates. He explains that this training simulates real combat, meaning every single meal is strictly monitored. To prevent poisoning, the Count already has the exact list of all approved ingredients. Because of this, any bad oysters with shellfish fever must be thrown out immediately. Dominic suggests cooking them instead, leaving the chef completely baffled by the idea. Dominic explains that boiling them thoroughly cures the fever, which somehow makes perfect sense to the chef. Dominic secretly notes that it is just norovirus, but explaining the actual science would make him look like a con man. Looking at the crate full of fresh oysters, the men wonder what kind of dish they can possibly make with them. Dominic gets a confident look on his face and says they are going to do this. Meanwhile, out on the training grounds, a group of soldiers practices their spear thrusts under the bright sun. Count Patrick Sinclair sniffs the air, suddenly distracted by a strange smell wafting over. In the kitchen, the oysters are sizzling away in a hot pan. The head cook explains his plan to coat the oysters in egg and pan-fry them as fritters. Dominic instructs the kitchen staff to quickly squeeze lemons and mix the juice with sugar. He explains that the tangy flavor will restore their appetite, while another cook suggests turning the chicken into soup. Dominic enthusiastically decides to make a spicy chicken soup to give the soldiers some heat. Sir Knight points out that getting enough rice is tough, so they should prepare wheat noodles instead. Sir Knight watches the busy kitchen with a serious and contemplative look on his face. Outside on the training grounds, the soldiers continue their intense spear drills under the bright sun. One of the exhausted soldiers starts sweating as a delicious aroma wafts over from the kitchen. Count Patrick Sinclair notices the amazing smell and wonders what they are having for lunch today. His assistant agrees the kitchen went all out, so the Count orders training to stop so the soldiers can eat first. The hungry soldiers cheer wildly, waving their spoons and forks in anticipation of the feast. Watching them, the Count reflects that loyalty is never free and that he is just an ordinary man compared to his legendary father. He stands tall in his elegant blue suit, looking out over the training grounds with a calm but focused expression. Because of that, he believes he must create every opportunity to face his soldiers directly and build a real connection. The nervous chef apologizes for the simple meal, but Count Patrick Sinclair reassures him that it is perfectly fine for a training scenario and asks about the dishes. Sweating under the pressure, the chef explains that the yellow dish consists of pan-fried tangerine and vegetable fritters coated in egg wash. He proudly introduces them as tangerine fritters, though a magical description reveals they are actually oyster fritters packed with health benefits. Next, he presents the steaming red soup made with chicken and spicy chili pepper, warning the Count to be careful with the heat. The chef mentions there are noodles hidden inside, and as soon as Count Patrick Sinclair takes a bite, he is absolutely amazed by the incredible flavor. While the Count admits the soup is spicy but irresistible, a nearby soldier boasts that any real man should easily handle this level of heat. Another soldier immediately teases the boaster to wipe the sweat off his forehead first, leaving Count Patrick Sinclair wondering if the dish is truly that hot. Curious, the Count dips his spoon into the rich steaming red broth to scoop up a piece of green onion and chicken. Taking a bite, he is instantly blown away by the intense fiery heat of the broth. He realizes this is a completely different kind of spice compared to the chief's previous dish. It is a deep cleansing heat that the head cook finds absolutely spectacular. Tears of pure joy stream down his face as he realizes his career is saved. Outside, the soldiers happily shout their thanks, while Sir Knight is just glad everyone is eating well. He admits he was a bit worried the strong aroma of the dish might be too much for them. Sir Knight asks Dominic why he does not plan on taking credit for this success with the Lord. He points out that Dominic's struggling village could really use the Lord's official support and rewards. Dominic chuckles and tells the naive knight that when a contribution is this obvious, there is no need to spell it out. Sir Knight looks on in confusion as Dominic simply smiles, knowing exactly how things will play out. Sure enough, the head cook runs over in tears of joy to thank Dominic, revealing they even got a special bonus. The head cook playfully asks if Dominic plans to pocket the reward all for himself, but Dominic quickly shakes his hand and promises to give him his entire share. Dominic explains that while he would love to hand over the entire bonus, he cannot give away what belongs to the rest of the kitchen staff, which the head cook completely understands. Suddenly, an elegant butler approaches and requests that Dominic, as the chief of Evergreen, come with them immediately. The butler advises him to straighten his clothes, since he will be meeting the Lord very shortly. Dominic politely agrees, but Sir Knight glares at him with deep suspicion, leaving him completely baffled. Sir Knight continues to stare him down with an incredibly intense, cold expression. Dominic flashes a smug, mischievous grin, thinking to himself that there is absolutely no need to show off. Sir Knight looks extremely annoyed by Dominic's smug attitude. While Sir Knight secretly fumes with a strong urge to punch him, Dominic enters the Grand Palace and formally greets the Lord. Count Patrick Sinclair warmly welcomes him, expressing deep gratitude for saving his soldiers from a major crisis, though Dominic humbly downplays his role. The Count smiles and mentions the shellfish fever, praising Dominic for turning a potential disaster into a delicious meal instead. Dominic modestly accepts the compliment, while secretly realizing that since the Count eats the head cook's food daily, he easily noticed the change in flavor. He also notes with surprise that the Count was already well aware of the shellfish fever outbreak beforehand. The Count asks Dominic if he would refuse an offer to manage the castle kitchen and household. Dominic politely declines, praising the current head cook and mentioning a life-or-death project back in his village. He explains that leaving now is impossible, leaving the Count curious about this mysterious project. Dominic gets a mischievous glint in his eyes, realizing this is his perfect chance. He points out that Evergreen is just a barren fishing village with absolutely nothing special going for it. After explaining how their seaweed income is temporary, the Count realizes this new project is Dominic's desperate solution. The Count feels embarrassed that a villager is doing the Lord's job of keeping the people fed. When the Count offers his official help, Dominic instantly shuts him down, saying it is not necessary. A wide shot shows the massive quiet hall where Dominic's bold refusal hangs in the air. Sir Knight is completely stunned by Dominic's sheer audacity in turning down the Lord. Even the Count is left wide-eyed and speechless by the sudden rejection. Meanwhile, on a beautiful day in the city, someone is having a rough time as they complain about a sudden stomachache. It turns out to be the guildmaster of the Rondo Trading Company, who is clutching his gut in pain. He fumes that if Anton hadn't started selling that weird seaweed, he would still control the entire ingredient trade in Count Sinclair's territory, and yells at his useless men to think of something. His subordinates look at each other nervously, sweating under their boss's intense glare. When one of them suggests roughing Anton up or burning down his warehouse, the guildmaster snaps, calling him an idiot, and reminding them he went straight 10 years ago. The subordinate quickly pivots, explaining that Anton's success is actually due to the chief of a small fishing village called Evergreen, who made the seaweed edible. The guildmaster puffs on his pipe, listening closely and asking what else they know. The man proposes that if they take out the chief, Anton will fail, allowing them to swoop in and monopolize the seaweed trade themselves. The other thugs look on in awe at the clever plan. They praise the idea as pure genius, and even the guildmaster cracks a wicked gold-toothed grin. With a terrifying look in his eyes, the boss orders his men to gather everyone and go turn that village chief into a cripple. Dominic kneels before the Count, politely telling him that there is really no need to go that far. Patrick Sinclair is surprised by this and asks if he really does not need his help, which Dominic firmly confirms. Instead of a handout, Dominic explains that he wants to ask for an investment, leaving Patrick Sinclair quite puzzled. He proposes that if the Count provides the initial capital, he will return it later along with the profits. Patrick Sinclair bursts out laughing at the sheer audacity, finding Dominic far more fascinating than he ever imagined. Amused by the proposal, the Count asks for the terms, and Dominic immediately presents a document for review. Patrick Sinclair reviews the terms, praising Dominic's boldness before agreeing to the deal, and ordering his treasurer to handle the investment. The Count sets a 10-year repayment period with a very favorable interest rate, much to the relief of Dominic and Sir Knight. Patrick Sinclair smiles warmly, admitting he almost let a highly capable administrator get stuck working in a kitchen. The young village head bows deeply, declaring how incredibly honored he is to receive such support. Sitting on his throne, the Count muses that if their plan succeeds, things will change. He envisions a landmark that will make the capital nobles green with envy, wondering if it is all a dream. Chief Callan is ecstatic over the Lord's investment, but Dominic points out he is holding the letter upside down. With the funding secured, Dominic and Chief Callan eagerly prepare to start the construction. The villagers celebrate the happy news by firing up the grill, praising Dominic for finally bringing them meat. Meanwhile, a suspicious man on horseback watches from afar, grinning about the fun they are going to have. Under the full moon, a loud voice boasts about knowing all along that the young man had what it takes. Village brags about securing a massive investment, but the other guys point out he only made Dominic chief because he was too lazy to learn to read. Dominic teases him about his terrible eyesight, prompting the old man to threaten to shave his head. Suddenly, one of the villagers stops drinking and looks off into the distance, completely confused. He spots a group of mysterious riders galloping toward their peaceful camp in a cloud of dust. Realizing they do not look friendly, he laments that their relaxing grill night is about to be ruined. The mysterious riders arrive at the camp, stepping off their horses with a heavy presence. The villagers immediately tense up as the intimidating group clearly comes looking for trouble. Dominic is shocked to see the usually cheerful fishermen looking so incredibly fierce and hostile. Sir Knight steps forward to face the threat alongside them, giving the relieved village head a boost of confidence. The knight turns to Dominic, addressing him as chief. He tells Dominic to hide, but Dominic's enthusiastic cheering from behind a rock only ends up annoying him. An armed rider demands the village chief step forward, while Village orders his men to capture the attackers alive. Sir Knight leaps forward, drawing his sword, with incredible speed, to intercept the charging horsemen. A rider is sent flying from his horse. The bandits are shocked by how tough the villagers are, and order everyone to dismount for a full brawl. One of the tough villagers lands a powerful punch straight to an attacker's face. A powerful hand strikes a bandit on the head, slamming him downwards. The villagers completely dominate the fight, unleashing a barrage of devastating strikes on the remaining bandits. A chaotic brawl breaks out as the villagers easily overpower their opponents, though someone warns them not to kill anyone. Watching from behind a rock, Dominic happily munches on a snack, thoroughly entertained by the impressive fighting skills of the village uncles. He is so impressed that he resolves to cook them even better meals and snacks from now on, completely unaware of a masked man sneaking up behind him. Suddenly, the masked intruder grabs Dominic from behind and holds a sharp blade to his throat, catching him completely off guard. The attacker compares Dominic's terrified face to a sketch, confidently identifying him as the village chief they were looking for. The captor shouts for everyone to freeze, threatening to end Dominic's life if they do not comply. Seeing the hostage situation, village head Callan panics and yells at Dominic for failing to hide. The masked man demands that everyone disarm and raise their hands immediately. He warns them to cooperate to avoid any trouble, while Sir Knight watches the tense standoff from a distance. Sir Knight raises a finger to his lips, signaling for silence as he prepares to make a move. With incredible speed, Sir Knight dashes forward to flank the unsuspecting captors. He slips right past the distracted villagers, closing in on the hostage-taker without drawing any attention. Chief Callan panics and begs the captor to let Dominic go, while Dominic internally groans at how easily his people are losing their cool. The bandit leader barks at his hostage to shut up and surrender, completely unaware of the danger creeping up behind him. One of the fallen bandits desperately tries to warn his boss that the knight has already closed the distance. The bandit leader gasps in shock as he realizes someone is right on top of him. Sir Knight lunges forward with a sharp glare, ready to strike and end the standoff. Realizing he is cornered, the desperate bandit decides to drag Dominic down with him and raises his weapon. Chief Callan and the villagers scream in absolute terror as they watch the blade go up. Sir Knight yells out in a panic, fearing he won't make it in time to save the young chief. Heavy shoulder throw. Dominic blinks in utter confusion, staring down at his hands as if he cannot believe what he just did. Chief Callan rushes over in disbelief, demanding to know if Dominic was truly the one who just pulled off that martial arts move. Someone praises Dominic for his skills, leaving him completely baffled about what he just did. He starts to wonder if he might actually possess some kind of hidden talent. The village leader confidently challenges Dominic to try his moves on him, laughing off any danger. Sir Knight watches closely, noticing something highly unusual about the exchange. Dominic struggles in a tight grip, while wondering if mana was flowing through the chief's body. Ian Hanover watches in disbelief, realizing that mana definitely surged through the village chief's body during that brief clash. The sheer force of the throw slams the masked bandit leader hard onto the grassy ground. Dominic is immediately swamped with praise and laughter from the relieved villagers. Watching from a distance, Ian Hanover lowers his hand and ponders what he just witnessed. The village chief playfully locks Dominic in a chokehold, while Ian Hanover decides he has another reason to keep a close eye on him. Later on, the captured bandits are tied up on the floor, confirmed to be members of the notorious Rondo Merchant Guild. Anton explains that he was already worried because these thugs had been loitering around their shops. He adds that their reputation is absolute trash, though he never expected them to resort to such blatant robbery. One of them glares sideways, looking incredibly tense. He scoffs and boasts that they are proud bandits who do not take orders from anyone, especially not some merchant named Rondo. Another tied-up bandit nods along, assuming this Rondo guy must just be a lawless rogue like them. Dominic lets out a creepy, amused chuckle at their cluelessness. With a terrifyingly wide grin, he asks if they seriously do not know who the man is. Dominic sighs and says it is a real shame, since he was actually planning to let one cooperative person go free. Immediately, one of the bandits opens his mouth wide and screams to be chosen. The bandit shouts desperately, completely throwing away his pride. Suddenly, the rest of the tied-up gang starts screaming for Dominic to pick them instead, furious at their comrade for betraying their bandit code. Dominic looks down at the first bandit who spoke up, mocking him for having such a sudden change of heart. Giving a cheerful double thumbs up, Dominic tells the guy that his sudden betrayal actually makes him a massive prick. With a bright smile, Dominic happily declares that the traitor is officially disqualified. The other captives cheer, thrilled that justice has finally prevailed. Dominic asks if there are any other volunteers to speak up, prompting a hesitant response from the crowd. A young, tearful bandit pleads for mercy, claiming he has only been with the guild for 3 months, and this was his very first raid. Ian Hanover inspects the boy's hands, noting they are still soft and concluding that he does not seem to be lying. Ian Hanover decides to show mercy, and tells the young bandit to follow them. The young boy is incredibly relieved and tearfully thanks them for the second chance. Later that night, Dominic tries to make sense of the situation inside a cozy room. Dominic asks if the Rondo Merchant Guild gets cheap supplies by running their farms for next to nothing, and the young bandit confirms it. The young bandit explains that the farmers are actually people who could not pay back their debts, allowing the guild to seize their land through usury. Dominic is puzzled and asks if there is not a legal limit on interest rates in the Count's territory. The young bandit is shocked to hear about legal limits, but Dominic firmly assures him that such laws definitely exist. Anton complains to him that common folks like them can't possibly understand complicated things like the law. Dominic sighs to himself, realizing that people really are the same no matter where you go. The young village head asks what else happened at the Merchant Guild, and Anton reveals they regularly raided and threatened small villages. When Anton mentions a rumor about the guild setting fire to a rival business, the young village head gasps in shock, remembering that exact incident. The young village head points out they need solid proof against Guild Master Rondo, prompting Anton to offer a potential lead. Anton pulls out a promissory note issued directly under Rondo's name, wondering if it can be used as evidence. Dominic lets out an evil chuckle, absolutely thrilled to have obtained the perfect weapon to take down their enemy. The young village head and Ian Hanover stare in absolute shock at the document, before Dominic breaks into a wide, mischievous grin. Dominic reassures Anton that with this, he might finally be able to stop running and live a normal life. He points out that mitigating circumstances exist, so he decides to take the promissory note. He reassures the young man that their village will protect him until this whole mess is over. The young man is moved to tears by Dominic's unexpected kindness. Under the night sky, the young man tearfully promises to live an honest life from now on. Meanwhile, in court, a panicked Rondo screams that the trial is completely unfair. Standing bound before the judge, Rondo desperately claims he is being set up and did nothing wrong. Count Patrick Sinclair watches in disgust, noting that the merchant is beyond saving for lying, despite all the evidence. Rondo keeps yelling about being framed, but the judge finally snaps and orders him to shut up. The judge scolds him for having the audacity to lie in the face of countless witnesses and solid proof. The judge furiously hands down the final verdict, seizing all of Rondo's assets for his crimes, and sentencing him to hard labor in the mines. He completely loses his mind as guards drag him away, screaming about how this can't be happening, and wondering what the corrupt officials he bribed are doing. As the disgraced merchant continues to wail, the Count is disgusted to hear about the bribery, and immediately calls out to the judge. The judge quickly bows and promises to hunt down every single corrupt official, earning a satisfied nod from the Count. He then hands over a thick envelope containing the complete list of the Rondo Merchant Guild's seized assets. Looking over the documents, the Count orders everything that can be easily liquidated to be put up for auction immediately to compensate the victims. The official nods in agreement, promising to get the auction started without any delay. With the trial officially over, Ian Hanover asks Dominic what his next move is, and Dominic replies that he plans to buy up as much as he can. Dominic explains that he specifically wants the ingredient farm Rondo owned, leaving Ian Hanover highly confused as to why he doesn't want the actual guild. Dominic points out that he needs that land to properly launch his care center, though Ian Hanover points out he keeps changing the name from a resort. Before they can bicker any further, the auctioneer calls for everyone's attention to make an important announcement. The crowd erupts in anger and disbelief when the auctioneer declares that each person is strictly limited to bidding on only 2 items. An official reads the Count's decree, warning everyone that no single group will be allowed to monopolize the seized goods. The merchants grumble in disappointment, wondering what they should even try to bid on now. Dominic looks over at the Count, trying to gauge his reaction to the announcement. The Count sits calmly in the gallery, maintaining his cool and composed demeanor. The Count gives a subtle, approving nod with a satisfied smile. Dominic lights up with absolute joy, silently praising the Lord's brilliant decision. The official begins reading the list of seized items up for auction, starting with the guild building and carriages. As the list continues through clothing and food, Dominic desperately prays that his target item gets called next. The official finally announces the Lutvia farm, prompting an excited cheer from Dominic. He grins at Ian Hanover, confident that the bidding limits will keep their competition to a minimum. Other merchants anxiously pray to be the sole bidders on their chosen items as the start is announced. The auction officially begins, and Dominic locks in with a sharp, determined focus. He rubs his hands together, fully prepared to secure the farm for his grand village plans. The auctioneer steps up to present the next item on the block. He reveals a high-end dress that Rondo apparently used to wear for his own personal taste. As the crowd reacts with disgust, the auctioneer prepares to start the bidding. Dominic mutters to Sir Knight that he wouldn't even take the dress if it were free. Suddenly, a bidder raises paddle number 35. The auctioneer calls out the bid and asks if anyone wants to go higher. The dress is sold, and the buyer proudly claims he is gifting the luxury item to his wife. Dominic and Sir Knight can only stare in absolute disbelief at the man's excuse. Their mood instantly brightens when the auctioneer announces the Rutvia farm is up next. The auctioneer clears his throat to get everyone's attention. He explains that while the soil is fertile, the farm is isolated by mountains and has a very narrow path. He adds that the previous debt-ridden workers are freed, meaning the new owner must hire a whole new crew. This explanation leaves the crowd completely baffled, wondering why anyone would buy land requiring so much road construction and expansion before seeing any profit. As they grumble about the terrible quality of the lot, Sir Knight turns to Dominic and asks if he is seriously planning to live on such useless land. But Dominic just smiles, clutching his bidding number 36, thinking to himself that this is absolutely perfect for his plans. Shortly after, everyone clinks their wooden mugs together in a loud toast to celebrate the successful purchase. At the tavern, the group congratulates Dominic on becoming the new village chief and getting a valuable farm at the base price, calling him incredibly lucky. Dominic laughs it off, claiming it is not just luck but heaven rewarding him for living a good life. Anton looks at him skeptically and asks why he bought that farm in the first place, wondering if it is actually going to be a communal farm for the village. Anton adds that if Dominic finds anything interesting like seaweed, he should hand it over first. But Dominic nervously brushes it off as nothing special. Dominic then changes the subject and asks Anton for help getting some seeds, which surprises Anton since he did not expect him to start farming so soon. Dominic slides a detailed list across the wooden table for Anton to review. Anton looks over the paper and notes that while getting the seeds is easy, procuring the different fertilizers needed for so many varieties will take some time. Anton is completely thrown off when his companion casually mentions he has absolutely no use for fertilizer. Dominic winks and proudly declares that he is going completely organic instead. Anton tries to point out that a fisherman might not understand farming, but Dominic quickly corrects him. Sir Knight is left sweating and utterly baffled, wondering what crazy scheme Dominic is cooking up now. Since no chemicals are needed, Anton promises the seeds in 4 days and happily accepts seaweed as payment. With the deal officially sealed, they clink their wooden mugs together to celebrate. The scene shifts to a bright sunny day with a clear blue sky. Suddenly, loud coughing and screaming echo from a carriage speeding down a dirt path. Dominic begs to stop, but Sir Knight yells back that they cannot control the runaway carriage. Dominic panics as he realizes just how ridiculous and dangerous their situation has become. Sir Knight clicks his tongue in disapproval as they continue along the bumpy path. He reminds Dominic that they were warned about this rough road, scolding him for drinking too much the night before, though Dominic casually shrugs it off. Seeing his companion struggle, Sir Knight tells him to just hang in there a little longer. He reassures him that their destination is finally within sight as the carriage rolls forward. The carriage wheel slowly comes to a stop on the dirt path. As the carriage stops, a tired young man inside lets out a long sigh of relief. He lets out a massive sigh of relief, glad to finally be off the bumpy ride. Looking out over the vast fields, Dominic is pleasantly surprised by the size of the farm, while Sir Knight dryly points out that it is still a proper farm after all. Dominic smiles, realizing why the land was so expensive despite its modest reputation. He points out how rich and fertile the dark soil is, though Sir Knight just nods along without really understanding the farming details. Sir Knight then suggests they handle their most urgent matter now that they have inspected the land, leaving Dominic briefly confused. With a mischievous grin, Dominic reveals that the absolute priority is making a hangover cure. Sir Knight asks if they should be checking the farm more thoroughly instead of resting. Dominic points out the land isn't going anywhere and gets him to agree to eat first. He pulls out a special ingredient that is absolutely essential for hangover soup. He is thrilled to find it still fresh, making the Knight highly curious. With a mischievous grin, Dominic prepares to reveal what is in the bottle. He happily explains that it is seonji, which is actually fresh cow's blood. Sir Knight looks completely disgusted and asks if he is seriously going to eat that. Dominic understands some people can't stomach it and offers to make his portion without it. He rubs his hands together, ready to get cooking with a big smile. He mixes the boiled blood and meat with seasoned greens, then boils everything together vigorously. Dominic is delighted by the amazing aroma, claiming his hangover is already gone. The smell is so good that Sir Knight changes his mind, surprising Dominic. Sir Knight reluctantly agrees to try the dish, and Dominic reassures him that seonji is absolutely essential for a proper yangpyeong hangover soup. To finish it off, Dominic finally slices some spicy chonggang chili peppers right into the pot. He then scoops up a generous bowl of freshly cooked white rice to serve on the side. The final presentation displays the incredible health benefits of the soup, which is packed with nutrients to relieve fatigue and improve digestion. Looking at the massive pot over the fire, Dominic wonders if he made too much, realizing he is just too used to cooking for large groups. But he quickly shrugs it off with a smirk, figuring they can always just eat the leftovers tomorrow. Dominic eagerly takes a big spoonful of the hot soup and rice. He lets out a loud shout of pure satisfaction, declaring that absolutely nothing beats a good hangover soup. With fire in his eyes, Dominic scoffs at standard hangover cures like pizza or burgers, insisting this spicy soup is the ultimate remedy, while Sir Knight watches in silence. Sir Knight stares down at his bowl with a sweat drop, looking deeply skeptical about the unusual dish. He hesitatingly stirs the soup, telling himself he must eat it if he ever wants to truly understand the lives of commoners. Just as he brings the spoon to his mouth, he hesitates for a brief second. Suddenly, a loud voice calls out from a distance, interrupting them and catching both of them completely off guard. Dominic spots a group of people running toward them and assumes they must be the farmers who used to work the land. But Sir Knight immediately senses that something is off. As the angry crowd gets closer with weapons raised, Dominic quickly realizes they definitely aren't here to give them a warm welcome. An angry mob of farmers marches forward, determined to stand their ground. They shout that even though they escaped Rondo, the next owner won't be any different, so they need to take the initiative and secure their rights immediately. One of the men confronts Dominic, demanding to know if he is the new owner of the farm. Dominic nervously confirms he is, but before he can finish, the man cuts him off and tells him to listen closely. The angry farmer yells at the top of his lungs that they will absolutely not be slaves. Dominic, completely bewildered while chewing his food, points out the obvious fact that they aren't actually slaves. The crowd is stunned by this revelation, realizing they have been tricked their entire lives, leaving Dominic to awkwardly apologize for breaking the news. Suddenly, someone in the crowd catches Dominic's attention, making him gasp in surprise. A cheerful young boy steps forward, happily calling out to Dominic as the village head. Dominic is thrilled to see Rocky and asks how he has been, thanking him because that promissory note was a massive help. Rocky smiles warmly and mentions that he hasn't been back in the area for very long himself. The boy introduces him as the Evergreen Village head, leaving his father completely shocked. The older man immediately bows, apologizing deeply after hearing the full story. He thanks the young village head for showing leniency, but Dominic cheerfully insists it actually helped them catch the culprit. Dominic reasons that Rocky was forced into it anyway, and it ultimately let him buy the farm. The villagers stand in awkward silence, their stomachs suddenly growling loudly from hunger. Dominic notices their hunger and cracks a small, knowing smile. With a warm smile, Dominic offers them a bowl of his hot soup and invites them to eat. The hungry villagers eagerly dig in, devouring the delicious soup with absolute delight. Dominic watches them eat but realizes there definitely will not be enough soup to go around. Dominic looks over at a nearby plant and decides to take matters into his own hands. He sets down his cooking supplies and prepares to gather some fresh ingredients. He pulls up a bunch of fresh, dirt-covered potatoes, straight from the fertile soil, preparing the ingredients for their meal. Ian Hanover asks how he can help, so Dominic happily instructs him to slice the peeled vegetables into thin strips. He reminds the knight that they must be sliced incredibly thin and evenly, leaving his companion with no choice but to sigh and agree. With a serious expression, Ian Hanover draws a sharp kitchen knife, ready to show off his skills. The knight begins slicing at blinding speed, turning the chore into a display of swordsmanship. The watching villagers are completely amazed, praising how great knights are even when handling simple kitchen knives. Dominic mixes the ingredients together, kneading the potato mixture to get the perfect consistency. He announces that the batter of potatoes, flour, and salt is ready, asking if they should start frying. The potato pancake sizzles beautifully in the pan over the open fire. Dominic smiles as he prepares the final touch for the dish. He sprinkles some spicy chonggang peppers on top, completing a golden brown gamma-jijian that is packed with health benefits. Dominic proudly serves the freshly made pancakes, promising they taste incredible and telling everyone to dip them in the black sauce. The villagers stare in anticipation, gulping nervously as they prepare to take their first bite. A piece of the freshly cooked crispy pancake is carefully broken off with a spoon. The golden crispy piece is then dipped into the dark savory sauce. One of the farmers is moved to tears by how incredibly delicious it tastes. Dominic and Ian Hanover watch the farmers happily stuffing their faces with the meal. Suddenly, Dominic remembers something important he needs to discuss with them. Dominic addresses the gathered crowd, asking if any of them have other plans for their future. The lead farmer looks up in surprise, wondering what Dominic means by other plans. Dominic explains that since they received severance pay from the guild, they are completely free to go. He gently asks if they have any specific thoughts on what they want to do next. The lead farmer explains that they have spent their entire lives doing nothing but farming. Nervously wringing his hands, he asks Dominic for permission to continue farming on this land. Dominic is absolutely thrilled and thanks them, admitting he was terrified they would want to leave. He enthusiastically grabs the bewildered farmer's hands, shaking them in pure relief. The young village head immediately offers to write up an employment contract, catching the man completely off guard. He explains his condition is simple. They just need to farm well without using any chemical fertilizers. On top of that, he wants to take all the crops for his own use. He promises to pay them in gold coins and hire extra help, but the farmer is still worried about the no fertilizer rule. The farmer hesitates for a moment, then asks Dominic and Ian Hanover to follow him. He leads the group toward a nearby building on the property. Arriving at the storage shed, the farmer opens the doors and shows them inside. Dominic peers inside and is completely stunned by what he sees. The farmer reveals that the massive stockpile consists entirely of crops grown without any fertilizer. He confesses they were planning to run away because they were being starved and exploited. With nothing left to lose, they had risked everything by leaving half the land unfertilized. Now the farmer anxiously asks Dominic if they will actually be able to sell all of this. Dominic happily promises to pay separately for this, thrilled that his plans can finally move forward. Just then the boy steps up and hands him a piece of paper. Turns out Rocky drew a simple map to make things easier, earning a warm thank you. Dominic looks at the map and realizes the kid actually has a real knack for this kind of work. He reasons that if Rocky learns his letters and numbers, he will easily do a full share of the work. So Dominic offers him the job of managing the farm's production directly, leaving the boy completely shocked. He playfully asks who else would do it, pointing out just how busy he is himself. He warns the boy that he will have to study hard and learn to read, write, and calculate. Rocky tearfully promises to do his absolute best, while his father falls to his knees in overwhelming gratitude. Meanwhile, over at the Mercenary Guild, someone asks about a place called Evergreen. The receptionist explains it is just a small fishing village, and the job only requires basic second-class magic. A young mage with long blue hair wonders why on earth a simple fishing village would ever need to hire someone of his profession. The woman behind the counter shrugs and explains that nobody knows, but the pay is so low and the place is so rural that no decent candidate wants to go there. She adds that the desperate villagers are even offering up to 3 months of free room and board just to sweeten the deal. Hearing the magic words of free housing, the young mage slams her hands on the desk and excitedly declares that she will take the job. A wooden carriage wheel rolls smoothly through the lush green grass on a sunny day. Diane walks along the path carrying her suitcase, with a windmill spinning in the background. Diane looks up with wide, sparkling eyes, completely amazed by her surroundings. She gasps in awe, wondering how a simple fishing village can look so incredibly beautiful. As local children play nearby, she smiles warmly, feeling she has found the peace she wanted. A person with blue hair sits on a bench, looking out at the peaceful sunny seaside. Looking at the sea, she decides she will thoroughly enjoy her 3-month stay here. She smiles contentedly, feeling very pleased with her decision to come to this place. Suddenly her stomach lets out a loud growl, making her blush with deep embarrassment. Realizing how late it is, she starts looking around for a place to buy decent food. The young witch walks along a grassy path, heading towards a town in the distance. Her eyes light up as she catches a delicious smell drifting from somewhere nearby. Following the scent of fresh bread, she runs through the fields, determined to buy some from whoever made it. But as she peeks through the window, she sees Village arguing that he should get the food, because he is the eldest. Dominic immediately snaps back, telling him to step aside since he is the one who actually cooked it. Dominic complains about only having 2 pieces so far, but Village tells him to go exercise if he has a problem with it. Watching this unfold, Diane panics when she realizes there is only 1 waffle left and she has not eaten all day. She looks around in despair, knowing there are absolutely no restaurants nearby to save her from starving. With no other options, she decides she has to resort to a desperate measure. She lets out a heavy sigh, preparing herself for what she is about to do. Casting her pride aside, she unleashes her magic because keeping her dignity won't fill her empty stomach. Her magic sweeps into the room, lifting the waffle right off the table before the shocked men can react. She happily catches the food in her mouth, thanking them for the meal as she steals it away. Diane happily munches on the stolen waffle, completely delighted by how delicious it tastes. Inside, Dominic, Ian, and Village stand frozen in absolute shock at the sudden magical theft. After being caught red-handed, she apologizes profusely, explaining she was just too hungry, and introducing herself as Diane, a Class 3 wizard sent by the Mercenary Guild. Dominic introduces himself as the Chief of Evergreen, and though she offers to pay for the bread she took, he insists it is fine and apologizes for mistaking her for a thief. When he brings up the bread, she suddenly gets incredibly excited, begging to know how he made something so sweet, crunchy, and unlike anything she has ever tasted before. She eagerly asks if he can sell them, and wonders if her promised room and board includes these amazing snacks. Hearing this, Dominic gets a mischievous look on his face as a brilliant plan begins to form in his mind. A few days later, the new teacher is already hard at work, getting the local children to hand in their homework. It turns out the wizard is actually doing an amazing job teaching the kids. Watching from the window, Ian Hanover notes that they will make excellent clerks, though he points out that Dominic is probably the only person crazy enough to hire a wizard just for basic math and reading. Dominic just smiles and proudly explains that getting top-tier education for the village kids in exchange for just one extra snack a day is an absolute steal. The knight looks relieved, admitting he wasn't sure if the plan would actually work but is glad it did. As they walk, Dominic notes that construction is nearly done, meaning they need to hire and train staff for the grand opening aimed at noblewomen. He points out that marketing is the real issue they need to tackle next. He explains that since the resort is meant for postpartum recovery, inviting a lady currently preparing for childbirth would be the perfect way to build hype. Ian Hanover suggests writing to the Countess, but Dominic doubts her situation would make for a compelling before and after case. Dominic then realizes he doesn't have to limit his clientele strictly to new mothers. He tells himself that getting stuck in that narrow mindset is completely unnecessary. He just needs an influential noblewoman who desperately needs healing to spread the word. Dominic gets a mischievous look on his face as a specific target comes to mind. With the perfect candidate chosen, a carriage travels down the road toward the village a few weeks later. Inside, Countess Sinclair observes that the coastal village is surprisingly well maintained. Her husband grumbles about traveling so far for a mere inn, prompting her to ask if he really wants that chief so badly. She is determined to recruit the talented chef, especially after hearing rumors that he snubbed her with no invitation because of her cheap payment. She plans to show him true generosity and steal him away as her personal chef during her stay. Upon arrival, Dominic warmly welcomes the guests to the resort as the manager and chief of Evergreen. An older noble mentions the matter of the Countess, and Dominic smoothly flatters him by calling him a VIP. The young noblewoman is completely puzzled by the unfamiliar term. Dominic quickly explains with a smile that it is just staff slang for a very important person. He humbly apologizes, claiming he let the word slip because he was so nervous in their presence. The noblewoman is absolutely delighted by his smooth talking and flatters him right back. With the pleasantries out of the way, Dominic claps his hands and directs the staff to handle their luggage. A polite staff member guides the guests inside, wishing them a wonderful stay. While the older noble is impressed by Dominic's manners, the young man accompanying him expects to be bored out of his mind. He watches from behind as three figures walk away down a grand hallway. He turns around with a mischievous grin, wondering if things will really go that smoothly. Meanwhile, Sinclair and the Countess stare ahead in absolute shock. They stand before a massive, luxurious estate, completely dumbfounded that this place is supposed to be just an inn. As they are shown around, the Countess gushes that the villa feels like a second honeymoon, while their guide points out the bedroom and study. The guide then pulls back a curtain to reveal the next surprise. He proudly presents a stunning private beach, reserved exclusively for their resort guests. He politely bids them to enjoy their stay in absolute peace. Left alone, the couple tenderly hold hands in the beautiful room. Sinclair looks at his wife with deep affection, calling out to her. The Countess gazes back with a loving smile, calling him her dear. Watching the resort from a distance, Ian Hanover sighs in relief, declaring the entire operation a total success. The knight asks how they can be sure everything is a success, and Dominic confidently replies that getting through the first day without a single complaint is already more than half the battle, pointing out how peaceful and quiet it is just before a loud shout ruins the moment. The sudden shout startles both of them, making Ian Hanover look over in surprise. An incredibly angry Diane storms in, clenching her fists and demanding to know if they think this is a bit too much. Diane is absolutely losing her mind and screams at Dominic, complaining that her morning schedule of teaching the local kids is already way too much work. She keeps venting, pointing out that she has to teach manners to the staff at lunch and fix magic devices in the evening, leaving her with absolutely zero time for a break. Furious, she declares this is a total breach of contract, but Dominic completely ignores her anger and cheerfully brings up the temperature control oven she built for them. He proudly presents a box of colorful macarons, explaining how popular they are, while Diane angrily snaps that she won't be bought off so easily. Dominic insists she give it a try anyway, and before she can protest further, she ends up with a delicious macaron stuffed right into her mouth. She stomps away in frustration because the treat is actually delicious, and when Dominic casually asks for another magic device for the private spa, she angrily agrees to get back to work. He can't help but sigh, thinking both the young chief and the mage are completely out of their minds for using food as leverage. As they review the upcoming schedule, he highly doubts that noble ladies will actually participate in morning exercises. Dominic confidently explains that people find anything fun when they're in a place they love, but his companion remains highly skeptical. Sensing an opportunity, Dominic smugly offers a 1 gold bet, teasing the proud knight by asking if he's too scared to take it. Sure enough, the next morning, Countess Sinclair is sweating and struggling through her core workout on the beach. The two men watch from a distance as a whole group of noblewomen diligently follows the exercise routine by the sea. Having won the bet, Dominic happily demands his gold coin, while Sir Knight reluctantly hands it over with a sour face. Their celebration is cut short when a panicked young worker runs in, shouting that an emergency has just occurred. The messenger delivers the shocking news that Lady Owen has suddenly gone into labor. Dominic is startled since she wasn't due for another month and a half, and immediately asks if the medical staff is ready. The young worker reassures him that the midwife and healer have already rushed to her room, strictly following their practiced emergency plan. Hearing that even the priest arrived first, Dominic smiles with relief, glad to see that his staff is fully prepared for the crisis. Inside, voices urge everyone to hurry up and get moving. The young mother screams in intense pain as she goes into labor. The midwife gently coaches her through the breathing, telling her she is doing great. Sweating and exhausted, the mother-to-be admits she is terrified of something going wrong. She worries that it is far too early for the baby to be born safely. The priest smiles warmly, assuring her that the goddess of life is watching over them. Finding her courage, she grits her teeth and prepares to push with everything she has. Determined to stay strong, her efforts pay off as a baby's loud cry echoes from the estate. The staff happily announces that she has given birth to a healthy baby boy, showering her with warm congratulations. Outside, the local noblewomen are already gossiping about whether the delivery went safely. They gather around the table, celebrating what a joyous and wonderful occasion this is. Countess Sinclair asks if the midwife and priest really had everything prepared beforehand, which the other lady confirms. One of the ladies points out that the resort offers a highly specialized care program for before and after birth. She mentions that some mothers came to the resort just for that service, leaving the others quite surprised. They discuss how the maids strictly blocked all outsiders from entering the room during the delivery to ensure complete privacy. The ladies are amazed to hear that they even put up a curtain, so only the essential medical staff could see anything. Sinclair thinks about how tradition usually dictates that guests must witness a birth and offer their blessings. She is amazed that the resort actually blocked people from watching, and wonders what it would be like if she had her own child here. She looks down, deeply contemplating the possibilities of such a private space. Sinclair realizes this means she wouldn't have to show her childbirth to everyone, finding comfort in the idea. And just like that, the world's very first postnatal care center is established, sending shockwaves through noble society. Back at the village, someone is laughing greedily under the bright blue sky. Dominic is absolutely thrilled looking at their earnings, gloating that they will clear their debt in no time. Village tells him to stop grinning like a goblin, but Dominic points out they are booked solid all the way through autumn. Since so many moms are coming to give birth, Dominic suggests building a temple to the goddess of life, surprising Kalan. The priest actually wants to help with the births because it strengthens his blessings, and noble families are known to show their gratitude by funding temples, encouraging readers to share the platform to help it grow. Dominic is eager to agree right away, but the old man insists they should consult the rest of the villagers first. Village sighs deeply, looking thoughtful as he considers the weight of the decision. Dominic reassures him that no one will complain, and Village agrees, noting that the followers of the goddess of life are pretty laid back anyway. With the decision made, Village asks if they should proceed, and Dominic happily heads off to the seaweed factory. Sir Knight stands nearby, watching Dominic with a calm and observant expression. Sir Knight asks Dominic if he really trusts the chief, and Dominic answers without a second thought. When Sir Knight points out that Kalan is uneducated, Dominic explains that the chief's real-world experience and open mind make up for it. Sir Knight admits that the chief is indeed quite flexible, imagining Kalan doing a funny stretch. They both agree on the value of listening to open-minded elders, with Dominic quoting an old saying about learning from everyone around you. The knight wisely points out that you should learn from those who are better than you, and avoid copying those who aren't. Dominic smiles and jokes that he just learned another lesson, asking if that doesn't make his companion a pretty good teacher. He quickly clarifies that he meant a lesson in staying humble, before showing the knight a notebook he's been working on. Sir Knight leans in and reads a line about only cooking with natural unprocessed vegetables. He asks if Dominic is planning to open a restaurant, but Dominic explains that standard resort facilities are just too easy for competitors to copy. Because of that, Dominic wants to start a business that's incredibly hard to replicate, leaving Sir Knight quite curious. With a confident grin, Dominic reveals his master plan is all about tourism. Meanwhile, the scene shifts over to Sinclair County's training tower standing tall under the bright blue sky. Inside, someone laughs heartily at Dominic's outrageous antics, reading a report about how he built a resort using someone else's money and kept the nobles out. The former lord looks at the map, thinking about how he originally stayed in this tower just to avoid annoying pests in his old age. But now, he decides he has to leave his isolation just to check out this interesting village. He stands tall and proud, holding his sword as he prepares to head out. With a wild grin, Sinclair boasts that he has finally become a sword master at his age, and wonders what his reward should be. The heavy wooden door of the tower slowly creaks open to the outside world. He steps through the doorway, realizing that his very first priority should be to go see his grandchild. And just like that, the Empire has officially gained a powerful new sword master. Meanwhile, voices call out to Sir Knight, questioning the sheer audacity of blocking the nobles who came to offer blessings. Sinclair reflects on how he stayed inside to avoid pests in his final years, but now he is fully motivated to leave his tower and explore the village. He stands ready at the door, holding his sword with immense confidence. His blade surges with a brilliant crackling blue energy once more. He is absolutely thrilled to have achieved this level at his age, wondering what kind of gift he should prepare. A heavy stone door slowly creaks open, letting a sliver of light spill into the dark room. He suddenly remembers he needs to go see his grandchild's face first, and starts walking out. And just like that, another powerful swordmaster is officially born into the Empire. Meanwhile, Dominic calls out to Sir Knight, saying he has a really serious proposal to make. Sir Knight immediately tells him to save it if it is just going to be something stupid. Dominic insists this is actually important and offers Sir Knight a transfer to their village with unlimited Teok Baki. Dominic tries to bribe Sir Knight into transferring to his village by offering him a lifetime supply of delicious Teok Baki. When Sir Knight just sighs in response, Dominic gets defensive and even offers to hand over the village chief's seat to sweeten the deal. Sir Knight gives Dominic a cold, unimpressed look as they continue their carriage ride. He scolds Dominic for talking nonsense, but Dominic complains that the mandatory village chief's meetings are just a waste of time. Dominic argues that sending written reports should be more than enough instead of making him travel every single time. Sir Knight counters that letters are too easy to forge, which is why the lords insist on meeting in person to verify everything. Dominic begrudgingly concedes since this fantasy world lacks email, while Sir Knight mentions that the Lord actually holds him in high regard. His praise catches Dominic completely off guard. He demands to know why he gets practically kidnapped and dragged to these meetings if the Lord supposedly likes him so much. Sir Knight awkwardly tries to change the subject by offering to get food, but Dominic snaps at him to stop dodging the question. Upon arrival, rival village chiefs immediately swarm Dominic, desperately trying to butter him up with dinner and wine to secure business deals. These desperate leaders practically climb over each other to secure a reservation at his resort, even threatening to settle things on the roof. Just as the chaos peaks, the seneschal opens the door to announce a sudden addition to the meeting's agenda. They complain about the bad timing, but quickly quiet down upon hearing the news come straight from the Lord's Council. Their attitude completely flips as they eagerly ask what this important new agenda item is about. The seneschal adjusts his glasses and solemnly states that action must be taken before autumn arrives. He presents an official document ordering every village to prepare for an upcoming monster subjugation. Instead of being terrified, the village chiefs are absolutely thrilled and immediately start asking about the logistics. Han Jung-min is completely bewildered by their excitement and asks if fighting monsters isn't supposed to be dangerous. An older chief explains that their protected region rarely deals with monsters, so they only clear them out occasionally when colonies grow. He admits it is dangerous, but points out that the villages stand to make a massive profit from the campaign. Since the mobilization is unplanned, the Lord will pay top dollar for local supplies and labor, though Han Jung-min realizes his own village has nothing to offer. He groans in disappointment, realizing they are going to miss out on a massive payday. While someone nearby complains about a stomachache, the butler delivers the news that the Lord has summoned him, leaving the young chief completely shocked. The butler confirms with a simple clap of his hands that he does indeed mean the chief of Evergreen. Two guards then carry him away as they tell him it is time to go. They arrive at the Grand Castle, where the Lord is waiting for them. Han Jung-min and Sir Knight bow before Patrick Sinclair, who asks if they have heard about the monster subjugation. The Lord smiles warmly and says he has a proposal for the young chief. Han Jung-min points to himself in disbelief, wondering if the Lord is really talking to a humble servant like him. Patrick Sinclair confirms it and offers him the position of field kitchen manager for the territory's soldiers. When Han Jung-min asks why the head chef cannot do it, the Lord explains that he saw superior cooking skills during their last training. Han Jung-min internally panics, realizing that stopping a norovirus outbreak has backfired into a lot of unpaid hard work. He reasons that as a wealthy resort owner, he has no need for exhausting labor, yet he cannot find a good excuse to refuse. Sir Knight notices his hesitation and glares at him, offended that he would even think twice about the Lord's offer. The knight is furious that a mere village chief would dare to hesitate in front of their master. Meanwhile, the Lord simply watches the interaction with a calm, knowing smile. Noticing this hesitation, the Count teases him that a few coins must not be enough to buy his time, prompting the young chief to immediately throw himself to the floor in a dramatic bow. The Lord points out that feeding the soldiers is crucial work, while Han Jung-min nervously claims he was only worried about failing to meet expectations, much to the noble's amusement. Patrick then promises that if this task is handled well, he intends to reward him with something he truly needs instead of just gold, leaving him highly intrigued. When the Count mentions hearing that Evergreen is prospering under his leadership, Han Jung-min humbly downplays it as mere luck, insisting they still have a long way to go. Han Jung-min continues to play down their success by calling Evergreen a tiny village without even a guard post, but Patrick calls him out on his habit of pitiful whining. Seizing on the word exaggerated, the Count smugly suggests that if the rumors were indeed overblown, he should probably change the planned reward, catching the young chief completely off guard. Patrick explains that he originally thought the village was struggling heavily with taxes. He teases that since things are fine, he might offer something else instead of a tax cut, causing Han Jung-min to scream in absolute panic to stop him. The young chief quickly praises the Lord's immeasurable grace, but Sir Knight steps in with a stern look. The knight glares intensely furious that a mere village chief would dare to interrupt the Lord mid-sentence. Later, as they walk through the grand hallways, Han Jung-min asks what exactly that phrase about the Lord's grace meant. Sir Knight casually explains that it is just a mountain dialect meaning a grand grace bestowed by a king. The knight suddenly looms over him with a dark, intense aura, asking if he is dreaming of treason. Dominic completely ignores the dramatic threat and casually cleans his ear with a finger. He wonders what the knight is even talking about, but shrugs it off since he is just glad their village can participate to get that tax break. Dominic turns to Sir Knight and asks if he knows anything at all about the upcoming monster subjugation operation. Sir Knight looks away silently, looking a bit uncomfortable with the question. He hesitates before starting to say something, leaving Dominic pretty confused. Blushing slightly, Sir Knight admits it is his first time too, making Dominic chuckle and realize the knight is not from around here either. Dominic wonders if he should ask the head chef for advice, but Sir Knight suggests asking the soldiers since the reward depends on their satisfaction. While Dominic ponders this, Mickey spots him and happily runs over to greet his chief. Dominic asks if he has been staying away from raw shellfish, and Mickey proudly claims he has been cooking everything properly. Dominic explains he will be managing the field kitchen during the subjugation, and asks what kind of meals the soldiers actually enjoy. Mickey explains that training and missions are so exhausting they will happily eat absolutely anything put in front of them. Dominic takes this in, but then Mickey remembers some crucial advice a veteran senior once shared with him. He explains that during joint operations, their soldiers feel completely miserable eating hard bread and potatoes while neighboring troops feast on hot meat stew. Dominic takes notes, realizing that fixing this food disparity would make all the men happy. He gets a mischievous grin as he realizes this is actually a fierce competition, making it a serious matter of pride. Determined to win, Dominic decides they are going all out with a flashy menu of soft wheat bread, meat stew, fresh fruit, and salad. Sir Knight watches him plan and skeptically asks if he is keeping the actual budget in mind. He suggests that Dominic should probably check the available funds with the financial officer first. Dominic takes a look at the official budget paper and goes completely pale, staring in utter shock at how little money they actually have. Han Jung-min recalls his past life as a nutritionist, wondering if people know what makes the job truly miserable, like planning meals around every tiny detail. He remembers the sheer frustration of kitchen staff completely ignoring his orders and hazing him, or perhaps having to ration every single drop of sesame oil on an incredibly tight budget. But he says that is still not the worst part. Instead, it is hearing the students complain about eating greens while comparing their lunch to the lobster served at the school next door. Nothing hurts a nutritionist more than having their hard work compared to the neighboring school. But now, things are completely different in his new life. Dominic stares in absolute disbelief, wondering if this tiny budget is really all he has to work with. The financial officer explains he was ordered to match the budget of the neighboring Viscounty of Delt, though it is still 20% higher than last time. Since Evergreen is a brand new village, the officer offers to fill them in on the old rumors regarding their neighbor. He explains that while Delt has the richest fertile land where no one goes hungry, they suffer from a major lack of military strength. After all, people with full bellies have absolutely no desire to pick up swords and fight. To make up for it, they rely on mercenaries, which deeply wounded Viscount Delt's pride and drove him to try something unusual during the last subjugation. The Viscount tapped his desk impatiently, plotting his next move to restore his reputation. He let out a smug, confident grin, ready to show off his wealth. Hearing this, Han Jung-min is surprised by the feedback on the soldiers' rations, but the financial officer confirms it was a massive success. With the situation now clear, he realizes how all the pieces finally fit together. He recalls that while Sinclair County has a proud knightly lineage, the current lord is actually a civil official. This explains why the current lord is so incredibly sensitive about anything regarding his soldiers. He feels pressured to match the previous count's standards, but ironically got blindsided by food instead of military power. Han Jung-min finally gets why they matched the budget, but wishes they had just been direct from the start. He says he knows what to do, though the old man warns him that ingredients are much cheaper in Delt. After thanking him for the advice, the old man asks if there are any spare rooms at the resort for his wife. Night falls over the grand estate as a single window remains brightly lit in the dark. Inside, Han Young-min ponders how their rivals have the clear advantage when it comes to ingredient costs. With limited time and budget, he realizes unusual cooking methods are out and wonders what his next move should be. When Sir Knight finally returns to the room, Han Young-min casually welcomes him back. However, the knight brings bad news, explaining that he cannot assist this time because he has been assigned to command the entire operation. Han Young-min stares at him with a hilariously smug, mocking face, wondering if the man is practically begging to be hit with a look like that. He then asks if the commander doesn't have to fight on the front lines, making Sir Knight wonder if the young chief is actually worried about him. Han Young-min quickly shuts that down, teasing that it would just be embarrassing if the knight's poor skills got exposed in front of all the soldiers. Before Sir Knight can even brag about his aura level, Han Young-min completely dismisses him to work on the meal plan, leaving the knight totally ignored. Sir Knight sighs at how a mere village chief just dismissed him, while Han Young-min gets back to writing, realizing things are getting complicated. The next day, Anton reports that he placed the initial order for the supplies just as requested. However, Anton is worried the menu is too simple, and even offers to cover the cost of extra spices if money is tight. Han Young-min slams his hand down, insisting they can't do that because it would make the Lord look bad, and assures him he has a plan. With a mischievous grin, Han Young-min asks to be introduced to a local blacksmith and carpenter, and requests an alcohol lamp. Looking down at the massive military camp nestled in the valley, a voice welcomes everyone after their long journey. One of the armored commanders acknowledges that it has indeed been an exhausting road for everyone. The knights exchange friendly laughs as they gather around the camp. Suddenly, a voice apologizes for being late, prompting the soldiers to realize that Count Sinclair has finally arrived. The knights turn their attention to the arriving noble, their expressions turning serious. Viscount Delt steps forward, expressing his surprise that Count Sinclair decided to personally march out to the field. Sinclair retorts with a sharp look, suggesting that Delt could have easily left the hard work to his fine knights and stayed comfortable at home. Delt chuckles, claiming he only came to witness the bravery of his territory's soldiers firsthand. He adds with a smug grin that he also hopes to see the famed Viscount's sword skills in action. The tension between the two leaders thickens as they glare at each other. Sparks practically fly as they lock eyes, with Delt silently fuming at how far Sinclair is willing to push this rivalry. The surrounding knights can only watch in disbelief, thinking about how incredibly childish their leaders are being. Dominic quickly steps in to break the tension, suggesting they stop the greetings and get some food, since everyone is exhausted. Delt proudly boasts about a military treatise he read on how to win the soldiers' hearts, catching Dominic's curiosity. The Viscount starts lecturing the others, claiming that according to military texts, the only way to win a soldier's heart is by keeping their stomach full. He sighs dramatically, acting as if he wants to feed them well, but is simply too broke to make it happen. Sinclair agrees with him, saying that soldiers definitely need full bellies to do their duty properly. Flattered by the response, Delt immediately tries to use the moment to set up his next move. He asks Sinclair to personally show him the hearty meals they serve in Sinclair County. Sinclair just gives him a knowing, confident smirk in response. A servant begins lifting the lid off a platter to reveal the food prepared for the soldiers. Delt puts on a show of humility, claiming he is deeply embarrassed to present such a poor meal. The onlookers are stunned by the variety, pointing out how impressive it is to cook this well in the field on a tight budget. Delt proudly winks, boasting that even the best ingredients are useless if the chef ruins them. The soldiers nod along, admitting that they really went all out to make a good impression this time. But Delt suddenly cuts them off with a loud shout to make his final point. He smugly adds that even with all their effort, their food surely cannot compare to what Sinclair County serves. Dominic humbles himself and asks Delt to teach him, which immediately strokes the older man's ego. Delt acts smug and agrees to the request, though he secretly thinks Dominic is just trying to protect his pride to the very end. Delt scoffs and agrees to watch, so Dominic invites him to follow along and witness their soldiers' food distribution firsthand, confident they will win by a landslide. Meanwhile, Han Young-min is absolutely losing his mind, clutching his head in sheer panic over the sudden inspection. He freaks out about having high-ranking officials visit on the very first day, frantically ordering the soldiers to move the waste bins and leave absolutely nothing for them to nitpick. Watching the chaotic scene, Sir Knight asks what is going on, but the nearby soldier has no idea, mentioning that Han Young-min has just been muttering about severe military PTSD. Sir Knight finds it to be an incredibly bizarre thing to say, but he cannot help but wonder about the strange situation. The soldier notes that Han Young-min seems surprisingly experienced at managing troops, wondering how that is even possible. Suddenly, Han Young-min spots the approaching group and loudly orders everyone to show their respect. However, Dominic immediately counters the order with a bright smile, telling the soldiers to skip the formalities and just finish their meals in peace. This completely catches Delt off guard, leaving him staring in absolute shock at the bizarre sight before him. Anton is completely baffled when Chief asks for spirit lamps, pointing out that they are way too weak to be used as heating devices. But Chief insists that is exactly what makes them perfect. Scratching his head, Anton says finding the lamps is easy enough, but he still has absolutely no clue what his boss is planning to do with them. He adds that he is equally confused about why they need to recruit so many blacksmiths and carpenters. Chief just flashes a highly suspicious, confident grin. He asks Anton if he has ever heard of a certain concept before. With a proud smile, Chief introduces the concept of chafing dishes, which basically means setting up an outdoor buffet for the troops. Cut to the actual camp, where the visiting soldiers are completely blown away by the self-serve setup, realizing the spirit lamps are being used to keep all the food warm. Count Sinclair's knight boasts to Viscount Delt about how brilliant their chef is, admitting he was skeptical at first, but now fully admires the genius idea. While the knight praises the Count's deep care for his men, Viscount Delt sweat drops and points out that such a high standard must have absolutely destroyed their military budget. Count Sinclair steps in with a calm smile, telling the Viscount that there seems to be a slight misunderstanding. As Viscount Delt looks on in confusion, Count Sinclair desperately prays in his head for his own mouth to cooperate and not say something incredibly stupid. Turning to the young chef, he points out that their food budget is actually identical to the Viscounty's peacetime budget, asking him to explain how they pulled this off. Dominic immediately recognizes this as his golden opportunity. He knows that if he plays his cards right, that promised tax cut is as good as even as the furious Viscount protests that such a variety of dishes on that budget is impossible. Dominic politely asks Count Sinclair for permission to explain the situation to the other nobles, admitting that a wider variety of dishes usually does drive up production costs. But he assures them they managed the budget with extreme care, prompting Count Sinclair to ask if today's feast was just a special welcome menu. Dominic insists this isn't an extravagant meal at all, and was prepared strictly within their normal budget. He raises a finger, hinting that there is one major factor they took advantage of. With a confident grin, he reveals that the secret lies in cutting labor costs. The crowd is shocked by the mention of labor costs, but Dominic explains that, since they couldn't cut down on the food quality for their hard-working soldiers, they had to trim the budget elsewhere. Viscount Delt is completely baffled, demanding to know what else they could possibly cut besides the cost of ingredients. The other knights agree, pointing out that even with soldiers helping out, feeding and cleaning up after 200 people is an incredibly labor-intensive task that usually stops territories from serving hot meals. They listen with tense, sweating expressions as he begins to break down the strategy. The young chief points out that serving large-scale meals usually demands an enormous amount of labor for prep, cooking, and cleanup. But by letting the soldiers serve themselves at the buffet tables, they save both labor and precious time. Viscount Delt still doubts he can manage so many dishes, but Chief admits they had to make a compromise. Chief explains that reducing workers saves on wages and supplies, though Sir Knight worries the service might fall behind. Sir Knight suddenly gasps as he realizes the brilliant self-service purpose behind this table setup. With a bright, heartwarming grin, Chief declares he will always choose to feed the people properly. He explains that as a chef, he naturally wants to use the absolute best ingredients. But if he has to choose between luxury ingredients or making sure everyone eats until they are full, the choice is obvious. A memory of his past life shows him sitting exhausted and hungry under a tree. He firmly believes everyone deserves to eat their fill, leaving Viscount Delt and his men completely speechless. Sir Knight realizes that is why the seasoning is so strong, and Chief praises his incredible insight. He explains that exhausted bodies do not need luxury ingredients, but rather food that restores stamina and salt levels. By utilizing mid-tier ingredients and applying strong seasoning, he kept the costs low while ensuring the food remained delicious. Still, he looks back nervously, wondering if the Count actually thinks he did a good job. Count Sinclair flashes a smug, satisfied grin, leaving Viscount completely flabbergasted. Viscount sweats profusely in defeat, unable to hide his sheer frustration. Viscount bows deeply in defeat, admitting he learned a lot today from Count Sinclair. Chief breathes a sigh of relief that it is over, glad they defeated the rival so the Lord will not bother them anymore. Chief clutches a document tightly, feeling the weight of his hard-earned victory. The official document declares that Evergreen's tax rate will be cut to 20% for the next 3 years. Under the bright full moon, Chief relaxes outside and happily declares that this is the life. Sir Knight approaches, teasing him for always talking about food, despite spending all day in the kitchen. Chief welcomes Sir Knight back, while the knight asks how much he drank to make his face so red. He ecstatically cheers that his goal is achieved, declaring his only job now is to get drunk every single day. He thoroughly enjoys his drink, though he can't help but wish he had some fried chicken to pair with it. Suddenly his foot catches on a rock hidden in the tall grass. Losing his balance completely, he goes tumbling down the steep hill. Sir Knight catches up and scolds him for wandering so far from the safety of the tents while monsters are still around. But Chief just laughs it off. He playfully boasts that Sir Knight will protect him anyway, or he'll just slam any monster down himself. Sir Knight suddenly commands him to shut up and freeze, leaving Chief utterly confused. He gasps in shock as something wet and slimy suddenly drips onto his shoulder. Sir Knight rushes over in a panic, yelling at him for chugging his drink so recklessly. Chief groans that his entire body is aching while Sir Knight calls out to him in worry. Sir Knight draws his weapon and shouts to draw the attention of whatever is lurking. Two massive glowing-eyed spiders emerge from the darkness right behind the trembling Chief. He looks up in absolute horror as a giant spider leg looms over his head. Sir Knight warns him that it's a Groot spider, explaining they hunt by sound and urging him to stay absolutely quiet. The knight swings his sword with incredible speed, slicing through the giant spiders in an instant. Dominic panics, warning him to watch out because there is a whole mob of them approaching. Sir Knight simply takes a deep breath, completely unfazed by the oncoming swarm. He wonders how they crawled out here, then coolly tells them to sleep well in the afterlife. Dominic immediately takes back his praise, cringing at how casually the knight can say something so edgy. He lets out a dramatic cry of awe as Sir Knight sheathes his sword. He keeps fanboying, thinking to himself how insanely cool that display of swordsmanship was. Sir Knight tells him to report the monster sighting to the Lord, but Dominic just wants to escape quickly. Suddenly, a chilling wind sweeps over them, making both of them freeze in their tracks. Sir Knight pulls him up and asks if he is hurt, and Dominic thanks him for saving his life. The knight urges him to move immediately, warning that it will get extremely dangerous if their queen molts and arrives. Under a bright full moon, the military leaders anxiously discuss the sudden appearance of 22 Groot spiders and check for casualties. Hanover reassures everyone that they spotted the monsters early enough to avoid any losses, bringing a sigh of relief to the room. However, the knights point out that these rare creatures usually nest deep in caves, meaning a whole swarm moving is a bad sign. Hanover steps forward and asks Patrick Sinclair for permission to speak on the matter. He explains that it is highly abnormal for these rare spiders to emerge out in the open like this. Patrick Sinclair asks if he is suggesting that something truly unusual is going on. Hanover confirms his fears, explaining that a queen has likely molted and her swarm is gathering a massive food stockpile to feed her. One of the knights doubts this is a big deal, figuring a mere spider queen cannot cause that much trouble. But Hanover closes his eyes and warns him that he is completely wrong. He drops a bombshell, revealing that the creature these spiders serve is actually not a spider at all. It is a sentinel acid, a mutant giant centipede that commands the entire swarm. The revelation leaves Village and the other officers sweating in absolute shock. Scratching his head, he points out that centipedes actually love to eat spiders, which makes this whole situation pretty weird. Patrick Sinclair is surprised by this, and he nervously confirms that while he is not sure about giant monsters, normal centipedes definitely prey on spiders. The Lord wonders why spiders would gather food for their natural predator, prompting Viscount Delt to suggest it might be a tribute to avoid being eaten. But Patrick Sinclair points out that even that theory does not make sense, leaving Viscount Delt completely confused. Chief explains that spiders hoard rotting meat to eat, but centipedes do not eat rotting meat at all, since their dietary habits are completely different. The group looks down at the map in deep thought, realizing they are dealing with a very difficult puzzle. Chief flinches, his expression suddenly turning grim and serious. He speaks up to Patrick Sinclair, asking what if that food isn't meant for the centipede at all, catching the Lord completely off guard. Chief suggests that the food might actually be an offering to something else entirely, something powerful enough to drive their natural predator away. Patrick Sinclair stares back in absolute shock as the terrifying implications of this theory sink in. Wasting no time, Patrick Sinclair immediately orders his men to assemble a scouting party of their most elite knights. He commands them to uncover the truth behind the spiders and the centipede, and to eliminate the centipede entirely if possible. Hanover bows his head in silent acceptance of the dangerous mission ahead. The Lord then delivers his final unexpected instruction to the group. Hearing this, Chief is completely thrown off, barely processing what he just heard. Now holding a sword, he looks incredibly nervous about what lies ahead. He screams in panic about why he has to go too, while Hanover frantically tells him to keep his voice down. Chief wonders if it is too late to run away, but Hanover coldly warns him that desertion carries the death penalty. Chief argues he is not even a soldier, but Hanover explains he is officially military personnel now, before calling him out for dropping formalities. Chief throws a tantrum, throwing his hands up, but Hanover promises to protect him if he just advises them on insect habits. Chief panics internally, realizing his only military memory of bugs is a sergeant catching centipedes for health benefits. Suddenly, a terrifying screech echoes from the sky, making Chief scream in absolute terror. Chief asks if those are eagles, but Hanover calmly points out they are actually wyverns flying in for mating season. He is relieved that the flying monsters didn't spot them, but Hanover insists they keep moving to find the spider cave before nightfall. Suddenly, one of the scouts calls out from a distance, having found something. As they approach, Chief is immediately hit by a terrible stench that makes him gag. Hanover points out that the awful smell of rotting corpses is exactly why they located the place so quickly. Looking at the pile of dead beasts, Hanover asks Chief if he knows anything about what could have caused this. Chief sweats as he reasons that a monster capable of leaving such a massive pile of corpses must be absolutely gigantic, recalling how bugs back in Australia grew huge without predators. Hanover covers his face as he realizes the threat is far worse than any academic records ever mentioned. Suddenly, the ground begins to shake violently, and a panicked chief desperately hopes it is just a normal earthquake. Hanover stands tense and alert as the intense tremors continue to rattle the entire area. As a massive, terrifying centipede monster bursts from the ground, the knights prepare for battle, while Chief completely loses his mind screaming. The soldiers charge forward, screaming at everyone to attack the massive threat. They rally each other to hold the line and take the monster down before it fully emerges. While the knights fight for their families and land, Chief runs for his absolute life. A soldier orders Chief to get back up from the Lord, leaving Chief worried about his safety. The soldier tells him not to worry, launching himself incredibly high into the air to strike. Chief stops in his tracks, looking back with a sweat drop on his face. Chief realizes that their current strategy simply isn't going to work. He notes that even though Hanover is fighting with everything he has, it is not enough. The giant centipede is just too fast, and its armored shell is far too hard to pierce. As Chief despairs over the situation, a mocking voice suddenly calls out to him from above. In a sudden shift, First Sergeant watches a chicken fattening up, and when a soldier in an apron asks what he is up to, he eagerly tells him to take a look. He explains that feeding centipedes to chickens has been a traditional herbal remedy since the old days. He laughs about the law of the jungle where chickens eat centipedes and humans eat chickens, while Chief watches in disgust as the bird actually gobbles them down. Suddenly, Chief looks up with a start as a strange sound echoes from the sky. He spots a group of wyverns flying high above, realizing they must have headed into the mountains for mating season. He watches them disappear into the distance, keeping a close eye on the flying beasts. Meanwhile, a sharp sword is drawn in the middle of a tense forest confrontation. Hanover stands ready with his blade, shouting orders to aim for the joints between the monster's segments. He starts to yell to pull the wounded back, but his eyes suddenly widen in sheer shock. He is completely baffled as to why Chief is just standing there holding a lit Molotov cocktail instead of running for safety. Ian looks on in absolute shock as the battle unfolds before him. Dominic holds up a makeshift Molotov cocktail, ready to light up the beast. He winds up, preparing to throw the burning bottle with all his might. Ian screams at Dominic, demanding to know why he is not running away. Dominic lets out a loud yell as he hurls the weapon forward. Ian complains that the throw was terrible, while Dominic snaps back at him. Ian glares back, urgently telling Dominic to just hurry up and dodge. Ian leaps high into the air to intercept the poorly aimed bottle. With a swift strike of his sword, he shatters the burning bottle mid-air. The giant centipede's glowing red eyes widen as the flames erupt around it. The massive beast screeches in agony as the fire engulfs its entire body. He rushes over to check on the knight after the explosion, asking if he is alright. Instead of thanking him, a furious Ian snaps at him for throwing a firebomb right at his position. The knight tries to pull rank, but Dominic grabs him and tells him to shut up and hide, because the battle is far from over. Suddenly, a massive shadow looms over them from the sky. Dominic looks up in absolute despair as a flock of wyverns suddenly joins the chaotic battlefield. While Ian prepares to accept his death, Dominic loses his mind and calls the terrifying monsters mere chickens. Ian is completely baffled, but Dominic explains the food chain of spiders, centipedes, and chickens. Dominic warns him to dodge immediately so they do not get caught in the crossfire. The wyverns swoop down aggressively, ready to attack. The flying beasts dive straight toward the giant centipede burning on the ground. One of the massive beasts swoops down, sinking its sharp teeth into the giant centipede. It tears into the monster's armored shell with relentless, brutal force. Watching the wyvern burn the centipede to a crisp, Dominic mutters that it was a well-fought battle. Ian asks if he knew wyverns feed on centipedes, and Dominic casually admits he was only half sure, leaving the knight completely baffled as to how he could gamble on such a guess. Dominic explains that since it is mating season, the wyvern is preparing to raise its young. He reasons that a protective parent would never tolerate a violent monster nearby, especially when those giant bugs make the perfect protein-rich meal for its babies. Ian quietly processes the explanation, sweating slightly at the young chief's bizarre but logical mind. But then Dominic shifts the subject with a sly look. With sparkles in his eyes, he greedily asks if he will be getting a massive reward for saving everyone. Later, Patrick Sinclair steps forward and calls out Dominic's name in front of the troops. The Lord praises his quick thinking for preventing any casualties, but explains that since he is a civilian, a promotion is impossible, so they will grant him a centurion's bonus and a silver medal instead. While the soldiers cheer and congratulate their village head, Dominic stands there completely dumbfounded, wondering if a cheap medal and a small bonus is really all he gets for risking his life. He screams in absolute disbelief, calling out to the Lord as if his entire world has just been turned upside down. Dominic grumbles while looking at his new medal, complaining that it is just a heavy piece of metal representing honor. Lying down in his tent, he sighs about how soldiers do all the hard work, which gets Ian's attention. Dominic sits up and asks if Ian will remain as commander, but Ian explains his authority has been returned to the Lord. When Ian mentions returning to his original duties of protecting him, Dominic dryly points out it was actually surveillance. Dominic tries to comfort Ian about his demotion by saying he also received a petty reward, which immediately confuses the knight. Dominic waves his medal and asks why Ian is being so modest when he actually received such a massive reward. Ian explains that the silver medal is only awarded to those who have achieved truly great merit. He adds that the medal also serves as a symbol that the most valuable spoils of war will be granted to the recipient. He stares ahead in complete shock, his eyes wide as he tries to process the situation. He nervously stammers out a question, completely caught off guard by what he is hearing. Ian explains that the most valuable loot from their battle was the giant centipede's carapace. When Ian reveals that the carapace now belongs to him, Dominic immediately drops to his knees in dramatic worship, prompting Ian to call him incredibly sly. Even though the monster subjugation is still going on, Dominic gets permission to head back to Evergreen, enjoying the peaceful, ordinary days he always wanted. Back in his element, Dominic cooks up a storm over a roaring fire, absolutely thrilled by the amazing aroma. He carefully prepares a fresh batch of noodles, placing them neatly onto a plate. Then, he pours a rich, colorful seafood broth packed with ingredients right over the top. He proudly presents his finished masterpiece, a steaming bowl of special seafood jampong. Dominic happily hands out the bowls, telling everyone to dig in and take one for themselves. Head looks absolutely delighted, his mouth watering as he holds his bowl and prepares to eat. Ian happily digs in as well, looking forward to enjoying the delicious meal. Meanwhile, Perot Diane stuffs her face and tries to thank Dominic, though she can barely speak through the intense spiciness. Theodore Sinclair is absolutely loving the food, shouting about how incredible it is while digging in. Dominic points out how surprisingly natural the former lord looks doing this, but Theodore just laughs and says he got used to it at the resort. Ian warns him that the spicy seafood noodle soup is terrible for his gout, but Theodore scoffs, asking what he thinks a swordmaster's body is made of. Theodore keeps praising the punchy meal, and Head agrees, saying only those who know life's bitterness can truly appreciate this taste. Dominic calls him a show-off and asks when he plans on leaving, to which Theodore replies he will stay at least until the big centipede carapace auction. Head asks if they really need to host the auction in their small village, but Dominic explains they will make more than double the profit compared to selling it in the capital. With a mischievous grin, Dominic tells them to listen closely to his plan. After a long and exhausting journey, the travelers finally reach their destination. One of them looks ahead in disbelief, wondering if this is really the place. They look down at the bustling, massive town, shocked that anyone could call this a small fishing village. They confirm they have arrived at Evergreen, and a young girl is amazed by how lively it is. A local chef immediately welcomes them, offering a great deal on hot noodles and free wine. The travelers stare hungrily at the steaming, delicious bowl of noodles. They start discussing what to eat, tempted by the grilled meat and sandwiches nearby. One of the men smiles warmly, pleased to see everyone enjoying the vibrant atmosphere. They decide to split up to grab food and explore, planning to meet back in an hour. Soon they return carrying massive shopping bags stuffed with food and goods. They laugh as they realize they all ended up buying way more than they planned. Down in the village below, the other locals are also laughing and enjoying the lively atmosphere. Dominic smiles contentedly as he takes in the pleasant weather outside. Anton then brings over some newly brewed tea, which he happily accepts. He takes a slow, thoughtful sip of the warm beverage. Suddenly, someone gasps at the realization that they can double their profits. An older merchant points out that capital taxes and fees are incredibly high. He worries they won't get full value here, but Dominic says the auction itself isn't the point. With a confident grin, Dominic explains that it is all about the demand it brings. Sinclair looks over, quite puzzled by what Dominic means by demand. Dominic points out their remote location and asks if visitors would really just leave immediately. Sinclair's eyes light up as he suddenly catches on to the brilliant plan. While Village is still confused, Dominic explains that lodging and food sales will skyrocket. Ian Hanover listens quietly, observing the young man's sharp business mind. Dominic adds that many travelers will end up staying for a few extra days. Village realizes their shops are doing great, and Sinclair finally understands Patrick's interest. Sinclair smiles warmly, thoroughly impressed by Dominic's sharp intellect. He then asks Dominic if he has any interest in becoming an administrator. The young village head laughs off the compliments, admitting he absolutely loves his current role and is determined to make a massive fortune here. Anton happily reports that their tea house investment is doing great, though he wonders if they can quickly recover the high cost of the magic tools they used. The young village head confidently replies that a 3-story building is bound to succeed and will easily become the landmark of their village. As they discuss the upcoming birth festival, a sacred event to bless the children with the help of the goddess's priests, young village head decides to head down to the plaza to check on the stalls. He eagerly schemes to profit off the event, knowing that people will easily fall for buying protective amulets once the priests start handing out blessings. Lying back on his lounge chair, he relaxes completely, practically hearing the sweet sound of gold coins rolling into his pockets. But just as he dreams of a quick retirement, some loud shouting from a nearby dispute suddenly ruins his peaceful moment. Looking over the stone wall alongside Ian Hanover and Anton, They see some aggressive thugs loudly claiming that the public plaza belongs to whoever grabs the spot first. The thugs even threaten to get violent with a woman, but young village head's eyes widen as he suddenly recognizes exactly who they are bullying. Edlin cracks her knuckles with a terrifying smile, letting the thugs know she has no problem hitting men too. She looks absolutely ready to tear them apart right then and there. Watching this unfold, Dominic panics, realizing they are completely doomed. The lead thug complains about people who won't hand over their spot peacefully, threatening to break her bones. But Edlin just smirks at his big mouth. The boss gets furious and orders his boys to teach her a lesson, while his lackeys laugh and make crude jokes about her wanting some attention. That trash talk seals their fate, and Edlin immediately pins the boss to the ground, snapping his arm as he screams in agony. Dominic rushes in to beg Edlin to calm down, while Ian Hanover spots him and asks if he is the village head. Ian sighs in disbelief, thinking about how incredibly stupid those thugs were to pick a fight with her. He notes that they messed with the former vice captain of the Callan mercenaries, while Edlin cheerfully points out she held back from breaking even more of their bones. With the beatdown over, one of the battered thugs limps over to Dominic, asking if he is indeed the village head. An angry merchant with a headband yells about being unfairly excluded, but Edlin is absolutely furious that he claims he came to enrich their festival. The young village head steps in, pointing out that they always welcome merchants, but this guy's group clearly started the fight. The merchant stammers and tries to blame the lady first, but quickly corrects himself to gentlewoman when he sees Edlin glaring right behind him. He then suggests they just pretend nothing happened and offers to take a spot on the opposite side of the plaza instead. The young village head just picks his ear, completely unimpressed by the merchant's ridiculous demands. The merchant is left completely confused by the lack of reaction. The young village head simply tells him to follow along if he actually wants to do business. He walks away with Ian Hanover, thinking about how these annoying troublemakers always show up during festivals and ruin the mood. At the village hall, the merchants complain about being placed so far from the plaza, but the young village head firmly states that only residents get those prime spots. The merchant tries to slyly slip him a bribe, but the young village head immediately asks if he wants to end up in handcuffs. He terrifies the merchant by mentioning that former Count Sinclair is currently staying at the resort. Terrified, the merchant quickly agrees to the spot, and the young village head promises a fair contract before leaving Rocky to handle the paperwork. As the merchants try to leave, the young village head stops them in their tracks. Dominic lays down the law for the market, explaining that they use fixed pricing here, and warning the merchants that they will be kicked out immediately if they are caught cheating. After that demonstration, Ian Hanover praises young Rocky and tells him to instruct the village fishermen on patrol to bring any outside merchants straight to them. The boy eagerly asks if he should just copy exactly what Dominic did, and Ian Hanover confidently tells him to leave the rest to him. Dominic praises the kid for catching on so quickly, but Rocky suddenly remembers to deliver a message that the former lord wants to see him before dinner. The boy adds that the knight is expected to attend the meeting as well, catching both of them off guard. Dominic wonders if something happened, recalling that the former lord was supposed to be busy with guests today, which Ian Hanover confirms. A greedy grin spreads across Dominic's face as he realizes this might be an introduction to a highly valuable connection. He immediately bolts toward the lodging, shouting that they need to hurry so they do not get scolded for being late. Ian Hanover can only sigh at how incredibly transparent and predictable his companion's thoughts always are. They knock on the door and a voice from inside tells them to come in quickly. They step inside and bow respectfully, with Dominic asking the former lord if he called for them. The young village head looks on in surprise, wondering if the person sitting ahead of them is actually Sinclair. He and Ian Hanover look across the lavishly decorated room toward the couch, where a small, dark figure is seated. The figure waves and greets them cheerfully, leaving the young village head completely stunned to see that it is actually a dwarf. Since this is a different world, it is home to all kinds of non-human races, with the most famous being the elves and beastkin. But standing right in front of Chief now is a dwarf. The dwarf asks if it is his first time seeing one, and Chief admits it is, so the dwarf introduces himself as Stonehammer. Chief reasons that since non-human races are under the protection of nobles, a country bumpkin like him would never have had a reason to see one before. Meanwhile, the old lord calls Ian over to talk for a moment. He looks closely at Ian and asks if his body has been feeling itchy lately, which Ian admits has been happening a little bit. The old lord calls him foolish and orders him to the beach at dawn to redo his training, prompting Chief to ask if Ian is finally becoming a swordmaster. The old lord snaps at Chief to watch his mouth, explaining that Ian is actually just entering the stage where he can properly control mana. Chief is confused since Ian used mana in the centipede battle, but Ian explains there is a massive gap between simply manifesting mana and controlling it at will. Chief then asks why they called for him, knowing it was not just to greet Stonehammer. The old lord smiles and says he has a favor to ask of the village chief. He asks to let Stonehammer stay in Evergreen for a while the dwarf complains about his bitter tea. He asks if the guest is just visiting for a vacation, but the old lord clarifies that he wants permanent residence, prompting the young man to explain that he needs a recommendation from the villagers first. He admits that he honestly doesn't understand why a dwarf like him would want to move to their village in the first place. He points out that they don't have any mines, blacksmith shops, or famous breweries, which completely shocks the dwarf, who had no idea. Seeing the dwarf's priceless reaction, Dominic realizes this guy came here completely blind, and suspects there must be a hidden motive. The old lord praises Dominic's sharp intuition, and confesses that Stonehammer is actually on the run. Hearing that, Dominic immediately refuses, explaining that harboring a potential criminal could bring disaster to the entire village. Stonehammer angrily snaps back, insisting that he hasn't committed any crimes at all. When Dominic asks who is chasing him then, the dwarf explains he isn't being chased, but simply wants to avoid getting dragged into annoying human business. After hearing that the dwarf just wanted a quiet place recommended by Theo, Dominic suddenly realizes a master artisan just fell into his lap, and instantly welcomes him to the village, making Stonehammer mock his quick change of heart. With the deal sealed, Stonehammer asks if he can build his house over on the nearby hill. Dominic happily agrees, and even offers space for a blacksmith shop, which delights the dwarf, though the conversation quickly shifts back to the mysterious human trouble he overheard while drunk in an alley. Leaning in close, the dwarf prepares to drop a massive piece of gossip. He casually drops a bombshell, claiming the crown prince isn't actually the emperor's biological son. The shocking news hits the old lord first, leaving him completely frozen in disbelief. Chief's jaw drops as the sheer weight of the secret sinks in. Ian is equally stunned, staring blankly as sweat drips down his face. Stonehammer laughs it off, saying he always thought the arrogant prince looked nothing like his father. He thinks it's a hilarious joke, completely oblivious to the dark, tense aura filling the room. Noticing their terrifying expressions, the dwarf nervously asks Old Lord if this is actually a big deal for humans. The next day, the group walks through the village, anxiously double-checking that the secret hasn't leaked. Stonehammer insists dwarfs never lie, but Chief warns him to keep quiet before immediately getting distracted by street food. Later, Chief and Ian admit to each other that they couldn't sleep a wink because of the crazy news. Chief looks at the usually stoic knight, realizing the guy was just as shaken up as he was. The young man points out that nobody could possibly sleep after hearing such shocking news, except for the dwarf who is currently having the time of his life. Chief asks if these street stalls are always in the village, but Ian explains they are only here because it is the eve of the festival. He mentions that quite a few stalls usually target the resort guests, which is music to Stonehammer's ears. Chief quietly hopes that Stonehammer won't cause any trouble, wondering if he and Ian are the only ones stressing out over nothing. Meanwhile, the dwarf happily chugs down another mug of beer at the tavern. He continues to stuff his face with food, while the others watch him in disbelief. Stonehammer begs them not to spread that rumor anywhere, leaving Chief and Ian looking completely stressed out. The next day, the first annual birth festival begins in front of a grand cathedral, and the crowd gathers to see the blessed baby of Evergreen. The high priest holds the baby and starts the blessing, calling for the power of the goddess to dwell within Baron Owen's son. He lifts the infant high into the air as a divine light shines down on them. The priest proclaims that a child loved by Mana has been born, promising a future so radiant it defies description. He urges everyone to remember this holy moment, declaring that his touch will guide the child's path. Chief wonders if it is spirit possession, but Ian explains it is actually a divine descent that he never expected to witness in person. Amused by the concept, Chief chuckles to himself about how spirit possession exists even in this fantasy world. The local priest holds up the holy infant, thrilled that the goddess's descent will guarantee a complete sellout of all the festival souvenirs. With the main ceremony over, Chief notes that only the evening auction is left, though Ian wonders if that is really necessary. Chief insists it is absolutely necessary because that is where the true romance of the event lies. He explains that alongside the auction, they are hosting a spectacular masquerade ball right on the beach at night. The guests are highly impressed by the romantic setup, praising the custom masks and the fact that anyone can join the fun even without bidding. Rocky runs up to report that the masks are selling incredibly fast, prompting Chief to remind him to keep accurate records so they can pay the creators. Just then, someone calls out to Chief, who turns around to greet Lord Stonehammer. Chief is completely shocked to see Stonehammer wearing only a mask and a loincloth, though the dwarf proudly claims this shirtless look is traditional etiquette. As they head toward the venue, the dwarf announces he wants to join the auction, but Chief points out he doesn't have any money. He proudly claims that their very existence is basically money itself, leaving Chief completely baffled. The dwarf hands over 5 custom manufacturing contract rights to sell first, making Chief admire how reliable he is even without a dime. An announcement echoes that the auction is about to begin and asks everyone to take their seats. Realizing they are running out of time, Chief rushes off to get those manufacturing rights registered immediately. Meanwhile, back at the resort, someone asks if they are going to the masquerade ball. Chief decides to stay put, while Ian suggests it would have been a great chance to expand his network. The camera pans over the beautiful, bustling seaside village of Evergreen as birds fly overhead. Chief walks through the streets with Sir Knight close behind him. Auntie Emmeline spots Chief and cheerfully calls out a morning greeting, which he warmly returns. She playfully offers him a massage if he is feeling stiff, but he jokingly begs her to spare him as the festival wraps up. A few days pass, and though the initial excitement of the festival has died down, Chief is still in a great mood. The streets remain lively as the number of visitors coming to Evergreen continues to grow. Chief happily reflects on how well the Centipede Carapace auction went, bringing in some very sweet extra income. With their tourism business officially off to a successful start, he smiles, glad to finally have some breathing room. Diane greets Chief warmly with a bright smile as he approaches. She notes that he looks much better, expressing how nice it is to have a peaceful mind after finishing her magic devices. They discuss the children's studies, and Diane offers to recommend some of the smarter kids to help staff the town hall. She then nervously asks him if she can settle down in Evergreen Village. He happily agrees, prompting her to excitedly share her dream of opening a magic device shop. While he promises to grant her a permit, she mentions she actually has a request of her own. He asks for fermentation magic, and she suggests an expensive mushroom-based accelerator from the magic tower. She offers to order it, and Chief eagerly requests a very generous amount. He is thrilled that his fermentation problem is finally solved. Now, Chief is ready to start making his special Tianmianjiang paste. A massive cooking pot is slammed down onto the grass. Village notices the massive supply hall, and Chief reveals he plans to open a restaurant. Village is thrilled they can just buy it now, but wonders what kind of paste it is. He explains he is making a special kind of doenjang, but the older man wonders why they can't just make more gochujang instead. The elder then asks where the knight went, and the young leader mentions he is off training with the former lord. He adds that the knight will be late, making his companion grumble that the man totally bailed on them. With work to do, Village rallies the men to bring over the stone mortar and separate the ingredients. The workers eagerly agree, and Dominic is glad they already know exactly what to do from past experience. Dominic instructs them to use a specific ratio of soybeans and wheat for this batch. When a worker questions using wheat, Dominic explains it adds sweetness, which Village highly approves of. As they knead the mixture and add salt water, the men demand plenty of meat later, which Dominic happily promises. Dominic heads inside to check on the cooking progress. He opens the lid and is pleased to see everything is simmering nicely. The pork belly and shoulder, which were drained and aged in doenjang, are boiling perfectly over the fire. He stays in the kitchen, keeping a close eye on his cooking. He notes that the meat needs to boil a bit longer before he moves on to squeeze the salted radish strips dry. Next, he tosses them in a seasoning mix of chili powder, sugar, fish soy sauce, and minced garlic. He happily sings to himself while mixing the ingredients with both hands. To finish it off, he takes out the tender pork and slices it thin. Though he laments the lack of salted shrimp, he's glad to have some pre-made samjang ready. The final dish is a perfect, healthy spread of boiled pork slices and spicy radish salad. Just then, Parrot Diane runs in to announce that the delivery has arrived right on schedule. Chief examines the potion that cuts growth time down to a week, despite its slightly bitter aftertaste. He offers her some of his freshly boiled pork, but she politely declines to save room for Auntie Emmeline's new cakes. Chief simply smiles and wishes her well as she prepares to leave. She dashes off in a hurry, determined not to let those delicious bakery treats sell out. Watching her go, Village and his companion marvel at how people from the capital would actually choose bread over meat. The villagers then bring out heavy pots of food, ready to start the feast. Dominic happily calls out to everyone that it is finally time to eat. The crowd looks on with absolute delight at the spread laid out before them. They cheer for their new village chief, though Kalan boasts that he was the one who handed over the job. The men laugh and tease Kalan, playfully agreeing that he did a wonderful job. Someone asks if the chief really feeds them that well. Kalan turns around with a menacing grin, asking if they want to come eat in their village. Dominic looks at his hands, remembering how the villagers gave him food and shelter when he had absolutely nothing. He promises to treat them to a completely new taste next week, leaving the village head curious. With a confident smirk, Dominic warns them that they might even get addicted to it. Suddenly, a loud voice calls out to the humans from a distance. Stonehammer runs toward them, demanding to get a bite of the delicious food too. He smiles as he comments on how incredibly sharp the dwarf's nose is when it comes to alcohol and meat, while voices call out for him to hurry over and bring some beer. A week passes by in the blink of an eye. The young leader peers into a container and is thrilled to see that the mixture has turned completely black. He happily notes that it is finally ready to be turned into chunjang. He heads back inside his house to finish up the preparation. Now he just needs to stir-fry the paste with some clam broth and caramel sauce over a hot fire. As he cooks, Chief realizes it has been a while since he last saw Sir Knight and the former lord, making him wonder how they are doing. Right on cue, a voice calls out to greet the village chief. Chief laughs at the perfect timing and warmly welcomes the former lord back. He spots Sir Knight standing there too, and happily tells them both that their timing is absolutely perfect. But Chief suddenly freezes in shock when he notices the incredibly tense and grim look on Sir Knight's face. Dominic notices Sir Knight, looking completely drained, and asks him what is wrong. Sir Knight looks absolutely exhausted, correcting Dominic that he is actually a sword expert. The former lord praises his progress, though Sir Knight mutters that more training will kill him. The former lord asks to join their meal, and Dominic happily welcomes them to eat. Sir Knight offers to help out in the kitchen, which Dominic greatly appreciates. Dominic instructs him to stir-fry the black paste carefully so it does not burn. Dominic prepares the black bean noodles, wishing they also had some sweet and sour pork. He turns back to Sir Knight, asking him once again what is wrong. Dominic is shocked by how thin Sir Knight has gotten from his intense training. The former lord keeps pushing him, ignoring how close to death the young knight feels. The former lord mentions they lost their appetite, but Dominic's cooking smells too good to resist. Sir Knight steps up to help cook, and Dominic gladly accepts his assistance. The knight instructs him on stir-frying the black bean paste, warning him to watch it closely so it doesn't burn, while Dominic realizes they absolutely need sweet and sour pork to go with it. He starts coating the seasoned pork loin in potato starch batter and drops it right into the hot oil. Dominic can't help but smile, completely thrilled with how perfect the frying looks. Once the first batch is done, Dominic asks what's next, and Sir Knight asks him to finish up the rest of the frying. He lists off the pork, chicken, and various vegetables left to cook, reminding Dominic to change the oil before starting on the veggies, which Dominic happily agrees to do. Watching them work from the side, the former lord quietly observes the two cooking together. He thinks to himself how much more flexible Sir Knight has become since he started hanging out with Dominic. He decides it's probably best to just leave things as they are for a while and let them bond. Later, Village approaches Dominic, looking down at the finished dish with a bit of hesitation. The villagers stare at the dark noodles, wondering if something so black is actually edible, though they admit it smells amazing. One of the villagers acts all high and mighty, calling the others uncultured and bragging about squid ink pasta being a delicacy in coastal kingdoms, but his smug attitude vanishes the second he takes a bite. Realizing how amazing it tastes, he quickly tries to hoard the bowl for himself, telling his buddy that it won't suit his taste and that he should stick to the fried pork instead. But his little scheme is cut short when a heavy hand clamps down on the bowl, telling him to stop right there. The village head looms over him, asking if he looks like a fool and calling him out for trying to pull such a cheap trick. Seeing his extreme reaction, the other villagers realize the food must be incredible and immediately dogpile him to grab a bite, while he desperately yells at them to just defend their own bowls. Dominic steps in to break up the chaos, telling everyone to stop fighting and take just one bowl each, offering sweet and sour pork and egg soup to go with it. Watching them dig in, Dominic smiles warmly, feeling that all his hard work in the kitchen was completely worth it. He happily reflects on how satisfying it is to see people finally getting to eat exactly what they crave. Later on, the village head approaches Dominic, who notices him and warmly asks if he is already done eating or if he wants some more. The older man scratches his head nervously, saying he has had plenty but clearly hesitating to bring something else up. He timidly asks if Dominic could share the recipe with him, catching the young chief completely off guard. The village head quickly backtracks, apologizing for being so shameless, but Dominic just smiles and happily promises to teach him since it is not that hard. Kalan looks completely taken aback, scratching his bald head in confusion. Dominic approaches him with bowls in hand, offering a deal to supply his black bean paste exclusively for the new restaurant. Kalan stares in wide-eyed shock as the realization of this incredible business opportunity sinks in. Overwhelmed with gratitude under the clear blue sky, he tearfully thanks Dominic for the generous offer. Later on, hands are busy washing the empty wooden bowls by the well. Dominic happily notes how clean the bowls were scraped, though Sir Knight wonders if it was really wise to just give away the recipe. Deeply concerned about the missed financial opportunity, he points out that selling such a valuable recipe to a noble or merchant would have made him a fortune. Dominic simply smiles and says they are family, which leaves the stoic knight completely speechless. After a bit of playful banter about whether that was an insult, Dominic smugly points out he still controls the main ingredient anyway. He gets serious again, noting that their village is still lacking in too many areas. Wiping down a bowl, he admits that while the place has grown, it is still not enough. Dominic asks if there is only one real way to speed up development, and Sir Knight correctly guesses he means drawing in outsiders to spend their money. Dominic praises him for his sharp memory and asks him what a place needs to make people want to spend money. Sir Knight recalls Dominic's previous words about becoming a symbol of desire, like leisure and relaxation, earning praise that he would make a better scholar than a knight. Dominic smiles warmly and addresses the knight directly to pose his next question. He asks what the single most important thing is to become that desired symbol, leaving Sir Knight to ponder the concept. Sir Knight wonders if it is beautiful architecture or delicious food, but quickly realizes those are not the answer. He reasons that even the former Lord and Stonehammer have seen far grander places than this humble village. Dominic looks over at Sir Knight with a knowing, confident smile. He reveals that the ultimate secret to making a place desirable is the people. Sir Knight repeats the word in utter confusion, completely caught off guard by the answer. Dominic explains his grand plan to build an academy to gather talented individuals who will develop Evergreen, adding that sharing the recipe with Callan serves the same purpose. He details how they will start by teaching basic subjects to the local children before establishing vocational training for adults. When Dominic lists essential skills like carpentry and cooking, Sir Knight points out that those are highly specialized artisan skills. Dominic explains that they only need to teach the villagers the basics to make them highly employable. But Sir Knight worries they will just leave for other villages after getting trained. With a smug look, Dominic tells the knight that it is time for another quick lesson about how the world actually works. He dramatically points up, declaring that society is entirely built on blood, regional, and school ties. Sir Knight asks if he is trying to start factions, and Dominic admits things could head that way, but says he is not trying to form cliques. Dominic points out they do not even have the power to hoard interests like nobles do. But there is a different angle to consider. He lists basic human desires like wanting family happiness, staying close to home, and wishing success for fellow alumni. He then asks Sir Knight if those simple natural feelings should really be labeled as corrupt power struggles. Sir Knight has to admit they are not, allowing Dominic to explain why losing graduates to other places is not actually a loss. He reasons that having people who are friendly to their village out in the wider world will naturally bring benefits back to them. Dominic smiles warmly, pleased with how his explanation is sinking in. He then drops a bombshell by asking Sir Knight to run the military curriculum, leaving the poor knight completely shocked. Dominic reassures him that he doesn't need to teach the villagers anything too fancy, just the basics like holding a sword and building stamina. He explains that the villagers just need to learn enough to pull their own weight around the place. Sir Knight tries to protest that he lacks the proper training experience himself, but a booming voice suddenly cuts him off and startles everyone. The former lord appears with a grin, telling Ian to just accept the task. Sir Knight looks completely shocked and calls out to his master in disbelief. The former lord loudly orders Ian to accept the offer, boasting about his own great eye for people, while Dominic silently recalls how the old man didn't even trust him at first. The former lord asks how Dominic came up with the wonderful idea of an academy for commoners, and Dominic simply replies it is because he is a commoner himself. Ian points out that nobles might not want to send their kids to a school run by a commoner, which the former lord finds hilarious. The former lord decides he cannot just sit back and do nothing, while the Empire's very first academy for commoners is built on his land. With a big grin, he officially volunteers to take on the role of the head of the martial arts department. Dominic is thrilled about getting a contract, but the former lord quickly shifts the focus to whether this academy is actually realistic. He openly wonders how regular commoners are ever going to afford the tuition fees. Dominic smiles, fully understanding that relying only on donations has its limits when nobles are not the target audience. In this world, even the grandest imperial academies need massive funding from the emperor, meaning Dominic will have to find a lot of sponsors to make this work. To help with this, the former lord offers to write a letter to the current lord on his behalf, but the young chief politely declines, saying he already has a plan. He explains that relying too much on outside funding would limit his freedom, while Anton panics in the background about losing what is his. After being teased about looking greedy, Dominic reveals his master plan to establish a work-study scholarship program for commoners. A few days later, the scene shifts to a beautiful sunny beach. Someone is seen shouting out loud near the shore. Dominic is relaxing on a hammock, complaining about how sleepy he is. Ian approaches and points out how relaxed Dominic is while everyone else is buried in work. But Dominic claims he would only get in the way. Dominic argues that experts like Stonehammer, Parrot, and the former lord are already handling the construction and organization perfectly. When Ian asks about promotions, Dominic lazily replies that the Fishermen and the Anton Merchant Guild have already agreed to handle them. An exasperated Ian asks what Dominic is actually doing, and Dominic proudly answers that he is in charge of the school meals. Dominic then asks what brings the knight over, prompting a defensive reaction from Ian. Their conversation is cut short when Dominic is suddenly summoned by the Count and must head to the Grand Estate. Upon arriving, he respectfully greets the current lord of the land. The Count asks about the Academy project, and Dominic mentions that the former lord fully supported it. The Count assures Dominic that he is also pleased with the project, so there is no need to hide behind his father. Despite those reassuring words, Dominic notices the Count's expression is incredibly serious and asks if something is wrong. The Count's assistant steps forward, explaining that a major problem has actually arisen because of the academy. Dominic is suddenly presented with a massive pile of scrolls and panics at the sheer volume. They explain that the scrolls on the left are lists of people from local villages requesting to enroll once it is built. Dominic looks through them and is impressed by how neatly organized the names, ages, and fields of study are. However, the pile on the right contains documents sent from other territories because Evergreen lacks an administrative office. The Count points out with a chilling smile that he is currently doing the village head's work for him. Dominic breaks into a cold sweat, realizing the Count is absolutely furious about the administrative mess. Terrified, Dominic immediately bows flat on the floor to apologize, but the Count tells him he is only speaking out of concern. He then orders Dominic to expand the academy's scale because he plans to announce it to the entire territory leaving the young chief completely baffled. Sensing a massive budget issue, Dominic hesitantly brings up the construction costs. The Count sighs at how good Dominic is at taking his money, but immediately orders his butler to issue a promissory note anyway, making Dominic sweat at how fast things are moving. The Count then states he hopes he won't have to do the village head's job ever again. While Dominic keeps apologizing on the floor, the Count wonders what they should do to prevent this issue. With a smug smile, the Count realizes he has the perfect solution. He points out that Evergreen simply needs its own administrator, catching Dominic and Ian completely off guard. With a bright grin, the Count declares that starting today, Evergreen will undergo a massive change. He officially elevates Evergreen from a simple village to a full-scale city, leaving Dominic and Ian frozen in shock. As everyone screams in disbelief, news of Dominic's grand plan to build an academy for commoners spreads like wildfire, reaching all the way to the imperial capital. But despite these grand plans, rumors about the new academy are already spreading like wildfire. Word on the street is that the barbarians of the south are actually opening up a school. At a fancy tea party, a noblewoman scoffs at the idea of an academy for mere commoners. She complains that those southern nobles have lost all dignity by associating with the ignorant masses. The other ladies eagerly chime in, agreeing that this is exactly why commoners are getting so bold. One lady wonders what they could possibly be learning if they aren't teaching poetry or swordsmanship. She turns to her maid Emily, who explains the curriculum focuses on practical skills for merchants and officials. The noblewoman scoffs, calling those practical subjects completely trivial and useless. She laughs mockingly, leaving Emily standing there in uncomfortable silence. Emily tightly clenches her hands, quietly enduring the cruel laughter of the noblewomen. Clearly, the news of this new academy isn't being received well by the high society. Meanwhile, a lone man walks down a quiet street, wondering where his life went so wrong. This young man with dark hair tied back wonders where things went wrong, questioning if his life was a mistake from the moment he was born a commoner, despite his top academy grades. He laments that being a mixed-blood orphan with a limp has left him stuck with nothing but menial tasks, making him wish tomorrow would never come. Suddenly he hears a rustling sound nearby and stops in his tracks. Looking down, he notices a mysterious letter lying on the ground. He picks it up and realizes it is from Sir Thomas of the Commercial Development Bureau. As he opens it, the letter explains that it originated in the northwestern lands to share something important. The writer jokingly begs him not to tear it up, urging him to listen carefully to what comes next. The letter asks if he has ever been to the south, describing a beautiful free village called Evergreen in the Sinclair territory. He stares at the letter in silence as his heart begins to race with anticipation. With a newfound spark of hope, he decides that he absolutely must go to the south. He vows to throw his entire being into this free land without holding anything back.